City Council back into order. We met about an hour ago to vote to go into closed session to discuss matters related to collective bargaining with our ASME Local 3399. And we are now resuming with the remainder of the agenda. We've already had the roll call, and the next item is the council comments or announcements. Are there any comments or announcements from members of the council?
It's cold outside.
That's not going to surprise anyone. One thing I just wanted to bring to people's attention, the Council of Governments is doing a travel survey. This is something that they do, about, I think, once every decade, and it involves sending out surveys to people who are selected at random. They're oversampling in the close-in areas like Tacoma Park, so it's entirely possible that people in Tacoma Park might get a letter from the Council of Governments regarding this survey. The survey is a little bit of trouble. It requires you to spend one day carrying around this little booklet where you write where you go, when you go, what mode of transportation you take. But it's very important because it is used to develop the database that is used to project travel demand for the future and to look at changes in car use, transit use, those kinds of things. So it is very important. And just wanted to let people know, if anyone has an opportunity or is asked to participate in the survey, even though it is a little bit of trouble, I would ask that you would do that because it's very important in developing the statistics that the region needs to better our transportation system. If you don't like sitting in traffic, this is your very small contribution toward making things better. The other piece, of course, being having to put the money into developing new infrastructure. Are there any other comments or announcements?
I had a nice vacation in St. Martin. I'm happy to be back. And I'm still catching up on all of my email, both at my day job and here. I just want to say that the Caribbean's really warm right now and cozy, and I miss it. But no, actually, what I wanted to say is that ever since I got elected, I've been trying to catch the attention of the State Highway Administration, and at the first of the year, I made a note of all of the lights that are, the PEPCO lights that are out in my ward with the pole numbers, and then also all of the State Highway Administration issues, and solicited some help from Valerie Irwin, our new county council person for District 5, and she's been very helpful already. And of course, while I was gone, I got a phone call from the State Highway Administration, a phone call I've been waiting for all year. So I leave and I get the phone call. But I just wanted to say that it seems like things might be looking up in that direction a little bit, and I really appreciate the support from our District 5 council person on that issue, and also on the issue regarding the safety of the high school bus stop that's along Sligo Creek Parkway, as well as some other issues that are of concern right in the Sligo Creek and Carroll Avenue corridor. So.
Mayor Porter, thank you. I'd just like to follow up on Councilmember Clay's talk about the streetlights. I've noticed that the county has a very nice website where residents can report streetlight outages anywhere in the county, except in Tacoma Park and maybe some other municipalities. The GAS program, which is paid for by county taxes, which we in Tacoma Park pay, has identified all the pole numbers on a nice map, but the poles in Tacoma Park are not identified by pole number. Just seems curious of why our taxes don't buy as much service as other county residents. I wonder if maybe city manager might look into that.
I'd be happy to, Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yes, Doug.
Yes, Mayor. Just heard and over the weekend, and I don't want to take away from Barb's manager's report, but it's worth mentioning that the Tacoma Farmers Market received a grant from the Kellogg Foundation to create a market for minority farmers in the Crossroads area. And it's really an interesting and very creative project that will use some microfinancing, using the balance of the grant funds to loan back to the farmers who are eligible for this, so that they can make some further investments in the growing and marketing of their crops. And as I say, this will be minority farmers, and it'll be on a Wednesday late afternoon to start at a location to be determined a little bit later, but it's going to start in May. So we think that that's going to give a real boost to our part of town. We'll bring people in. We'll provide a gathering place for a lot of the folks now who really don't have many places, parks and so forth, to get together. And in addition, it ought to really help people in that area who are small farmers, but they grow things that people in that area want to buy and can't get quite readily from the supermarket. So congratulations to those folks, and I think we'll all look forward to going over there on a nice spring warm day and seeing what those farmers have to offer.
Thank you. That I was noting that on the manager's report too, and I appreciate your giving us a little bit more information.
A couple of us noted on the way in here a problem that maybe if the manager could get us some information back on that, the recycling containers in the hall, in the general area out here. There used to be, like a mixed paper and a can or bottle one, and it seemed like there's less variety of containers, and people have difficulty discerning what to put in where, and they tend to be all mixed. And I know we used to have a lot of different ones out there, and if we could just get some information back on the reason for lesser numbers, whether there's success in people putting the right things in there, and whether we need some additional ones.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the public comment period. This is the time set aside on the agenda for items that are not on our regular, tonight, it's our special session agenda. This would include either items on the work session agenda or any other matters that you wish to bring before the council. I would ask when you come forward if you would identify yourself and if you would keep your comments to 3 minutes. Pat?
Hi, my name's Pat Loveless, 7620 Maple Avenue here in Tacoma Park. I want to ask a question. We had a wonderful time around Christmas with that nativity scene, with real animals, sheep, horses and donkeys. I don't mean Democrats. I mean real donkeys and sheep. And the people dressed up as Roman soldiers. I was wondering, I talked to Councilman Pastor De Silva at the Adventist church. He goes to my church. And he said it was pretty expensive to put on. And I was wondering, I talked to him, and he'd be willing to put it on each year if the city would be willing to help out with that. And if anyone has any problem with that, I was wondering if we could put on something like a faith fest each year, where each religion could, show their, what they're all about, like the Jewish faith, the Muslim faith, the Catholic faith, the Adventist, and we could all get together and have a faith fest around that time of year. In addition, and putting on that wonderful nativity scene, which everybody in Tacoma Park seems to enjoy. Because I was up there, you don't need eyesight to know what a wonderful, wonderful experience that had been. And I'm wondering if the city could set aside some funds for that, because that would be a wonderful thing each year to bring people into our city to see. It would be really wonderful. Because I was talking to my family in Massachusetts, and they don't do anything like that anywhere. And I think it would be really wonderful, because the kids love the animals, they love to see the baby Jesus, and they love to learn about what we're all about. Second thing is on January 27th, we're going to be having a big anti-war march. And I think it's very important that people from Tacoma Park try to get out to march against that war, because George W. Bush, he's going to be putting more and more troops over in Iraq, and he's saber-rattling at Iran right now as we speak. He's always threatening Iran. He's sending 21,500 more troops over into Iraq as we speak, calling it a surge. I think we should surge the troops out of Iraq back home, And if we care about our loved ones and care about the loved ones of our friends, we should be out there and be counted. We should try to get Tacoma Park as a peace community well represented down at the anti-war march. Because a lot of these marches, I'm disappointed that I don't see too many Tacoma Parks out there. I try to get to every one of them as much as possible. And if I can do it, I think other people at Tacoma Park can do it. It's a very good learning experience for your kids in school, to help take part in politics, to help take part in civic duty, because it is your civic duty to protect your family and your friends from a dictator such as George Bush. We've got to bring the troops home. We've got to stop the war in Iraq, and we've got to start spending our money sensibly. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Pat.
January 27th. Hope to see you out there. It's a weekend, a Saturday.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My back. Ah. Give me your hand. Damn it. Shit. My back. Are you okay?
I got a bad back. I will be in a minute.
You doing okay, Pat?
I'm all right. My back just acted at home.
Okay.
Does it every so often.
Hi, I'm Rosalind Grigsby. I'm Executive Director of the Old Tacoma Business Association. I'm coming before you tonight to talk about the issues of the crime and armed robberies that have been going on in Tacoma Park. I know that you are just as concerned and attentive to it as we are, and I want to begin by thanking the responsiveness of city staff to me. I've been in contact with Barbara Matthews, Ed Kersey, Acting Police Chief, and Corporal Tina Smith have all been in touch with me in the past week about these issues. I know the city police are focusing more on the problem. I see more patrols downtown. I also see the efforts of various business people to make themselves safer. They're doing things like keeping the door locked and opening it when a customer knocks. They're posting signs saying employees don't have access to the safe. They're getting surveillance cameras. I know of one shop that's even been closed for a period of this time. As a representative of the Old Tacoma Business Association, I'm asking for some strategic and creative thinking to help us through this period of trouble and to identify ways that Old Tacoma Business Association can work effectively with the city. OTBA requests a continued and visible presence of police in the form of more patrols, a cop on the beat, and those kinds of efforts. Perhaps with funds available from the 2 unfilled positions on the police force, the city could consider hiring an off-duty police officer to act as a security guard in the Old Tacoma area until this thing is resolved. I've already asked a local property owner about the possibility of providing a place for a temporary police substation in a vacant spot downtown. If that's a viable option, OTBA will work closely with both police and with local property owners to find a suitable location. OTBA requests greater communication. While recognizing the importance of protecting ongoing investigative work, we also know that the faster and better the information that the business people have, the more effectively we can respond to the situation. Businesses are the eyes and ears on the street in this town. And OTBA is already helping disseminate information that I receive from the police to increase the numbers of businesses that we're in touch with and to try and get information out. We hope the police will also increase their outreach efforts. In addition, we request specific guidelines of what businesses can do better to protect themselves, what businesses should be watching for, and specifically how to report suspicious activity, because I'm hearing more stories of things that get people's hackles up but don't amount to something, maybe a thwarted effort, and how that information gets passed through the appropriate channels. OTBA requests continuing and improving cross-jurisdictional collaboration with the police forces of D.C., Montgomery County, and Prince George's County. In particular, we feel that close collaboration between patrol officers and detectives of Tacoma Park and of the D.C. 4th District is essential to ongoing safety concerns. OTBA requests ongoing, proactive community policing as essential in the long run to the vitality and the safety and the commercial viability of this area, even after these crimes are solved. As you know, OTBA has set up a general meeting in February, a public meeting on safety and crime prevention. We have confirmation both from the Tacoma Park Police, the D.C. 4th District, and Safe Tacoma that they will all participate in the meeting as well. By finding common sense solutions to the current difficult problem, we can develop a framework for the future. Only when criminals see that Tacoma Park that has nothing to gain for them will they stop this activity. OTVA seeks to work with you to develop effective strategies to bring this rash of robberies to an end. We appreciate both the visible efforts and the behind-the-scenes work of the city and the police to capture the criminals holding our community at gunpoint. It has to stop. It will stop with our joint efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Roz. Actually, some of the things that you mentioned, I thought we were doing in terms of communicating with businesses, but one of the things that occurred to me as you were speaking is that it might be useful, you know, I'd be willing to sit down with you. I said I would come to the February meeting, but maybe before that time, and maybe, I don't know, have you had an opportunity to sit down with other city staff?
I've exchanged messages with Barbara Matthews. I've talked with Ed Kruskin. I've talked with Colton Smith.
Okay. I would be happy to pull together a meeting and sit down with you, because my sense is that perhaps there's some things that aren't quite connecting. Either I'm out of the loop, which couldn't be the case, or, you know, perhaps some of the things you mentioned, communication is not going all the way through, and I would be happy to do that. You know, as Bruce brought up at the last meeting, you know, there are some real concerns among several people in the council about these issues, and, you know, if I can do anything to try and close the loop in terms of the information, I'd be happy to do it. Anyone else?
Good evening, council members. I'm Seth Grimes, Willow Avenue. Hello to everyone in the audience and watching on cable television. I'm always astounded when people come up to me who live nowhere near Tacoma Park and say they saw me on cable television from Tacoma Park City Council meetings. That happened to me just this Saturday evening. It's difficult to bring hard subjects like crime to a meeting when you know that they're going to be exposed throughout the area. We had a debate on the email list in my neighborhood, the Philadelphia Eastern neighborhood, about this subject when one person in the neighborhood said that she had posted something to a 3,000-member email list in the Washington, D.C. area, saying that people should be concerned about moving here because of crime problems. One point I have to make as the president of the Old Town Residents Association is that these problems are not limited, the recent problems are not limited to the commercial area. One resident, longtime resident, whom you all know, Dick O'Connor, his house was burglarized just a few weeks ago, and it was burglarized a year ago, and I believe his teenage son confronted the burglar in that instance. So the crime is a great problem. We all know that the Old Town Residents Association brought before you a resolution that we passed under our former president, Wolfgang Mergner, in October 2004, asking for increased patrol presence and visibility throughout Tacoma Park. One of our suggestions back then, which we brought to you, was the idea of having a patrol post in the Old Town commercial area of the type that Roz was mentioning as a temporary measure. We would like to see that kind of thing as a way to boost the police visibility as a crime deterrent and to deal with the perceptions of a crime problem here. I'm also here as the president since November of Safe Tacoma, which is designed to be a cross-jurisdictional crime prevention program. We've yet to launch as a program because of difficulties in having the funding start flowing from the District of Columbia. We are very grateful to you all, spearheaded by Councilmember Austin Lane, who's not present this evening, in voting $75,000 funding in the current fiscal year. We're well over halfway through the fiscal year, and unfortunately the program's not going. We would ask you to take a leadership position and maybe see if you can take some action despite the lack of funding from the district. Sarah Green, who's the Safe Tacoma secretary, is here also. We do have a meeting with Commander Burton from the Metropolitan Police Department, 4th District, later this week. Indications to another of our board members, to Sarah, and to another one of our board members, Faith Wheeler from the district, are that the district has overcome the bureaucratic problems in getting the funding flowing. Now, I know from a meeting last month with City Manager Matthews and Acting Chief Corsi that the council does very much want to re-examine the type of program that would be applied in the old Tacoma area, that it wouldn't be just a copy of the program, as it shouldn't be, the copy of the program in the Tacoma-Langley Crossroads area, that conditions are different, not only because it's a cross-jurisdictional area in Old Tacoma, but also because of the nature of the area and the people who live and work there. We would like to see you schedule, even if only provisionally, a council work session, which I know that Mayor Porter you're willing to do. We would like to see that get on the schedule because of our anticipated breakthrough with the District of Columbia in resolving the funding issues, so that we can understand jointly what kind of program we will have going forward. The last thing I will mention is that Safe Tacoma, in anticipation of the ability to start operating the corporation that has been set up in Maryland and as a foreign corporation in the district, that we are planning to hold a stakeholders meeting in March that would involve representatives of businesses and organizations in the Tacoma area, both the District of Columbia and Maryland, to try to provide a formal channel for input from all of the constituents, whether residents or businesses or churches or school groups or recreation groups, into how this program can most benefit the community. So I hope to be able to report to you as an outcome of the meeting that Sarah Green and Faith Wheeler and Gail Fisher-Stewart, who has joined our board, and I will be having with Commander Burton, that the district funding impasse has been broken through this week so that we can get the program underway. And I look forward to meeting with you perhaps in a work session in the coming weeks on this subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. No, I'm very anxious to have that meeting also. As a matter of fact, Barb Matthews and I just very recently had a discussion about it. Her conversations with Commander Burton didn't indicate they were quite that close to being ready to go. And we're going to try and clarify that, because as soon as it looks like things are about to happen, I'll go ahead and schedule it. We weren't aware that it was quite that close to being ready to go.
Yeah, well, we have the advantage that we're working with two District A and C commissioners who are elected by residents and so carry a certain clout, which a Maryland resident can't and shouldn't attempt to for various reasons with district officials. And I would venture to invite you, City Manager Matthews, to join us in our meeting with Commander Burton on Friday if you're available and would like to do that.
It would be very good to get a really good handle on this, and I appreciate that. I think that would be useful to do. Thank you. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Sam Kitten. I'm a resident at 7003 Sycamore Avenue, and also my wife and I own a commercial building at 7054, 7056 Carroll Avenue, which unfortunately has been robbed by criminals using guns twice in the last 6 weeks. So this continues this theme of the crime in Old Town. Firstly, I do want to say we have noticed more police presence in the last week, and we appreciate that, but we want to see it continue. We want to see it be part of the neighborhood. We need the police to be part of the neighborhood. They haven't been around for years. We've had our office in Old Town we've had a presence of one kind or another since about 1992. And there have been periods of years where, yes, they've been around, and there were officers, remember maybe as the last maybe around 97 or so, that regularly walked into the businesses, even the offices, because we were in the office building across from CBS, and they would introduce themselves. They would unsolicited give us ideas of how we can make our place safer and stuff like that. That hasn't happened in many years and obviously needs to happen again. The lack of a police presence in Old Town has certainly opened up this hole in which the criminals have noticed over the last couple of years, and now it's considered pretty much an easy target for crime. Admittedly, there are other areas in the D.C. metropolitan area that have crime on a pretty regular basis, but per capita, I think if you run some statistics, the amount of holdups by gun that we've had in the last 2 months is just remarkable. So it's a serious situation that I appreciate your attention to. The other thing, besides the concern for businesses losing their day or two of money that they have on hand when they're robbed, the scaring of customers away from the store when they hear about guns and the like is one of the things that really affected me is that the employees of the Subway sandwich shop that's been held up twice in the last 6 weeks, 3 of them quit after the second. They didn't quit after the first robbery, but they quit after the second robbery. Certainly understandable when you have a gun held to your head. So, but I find it a real sense of loss because these 3 people, you know, I'm sure that they depended on their jobs for their livelihood, and they had to make the decision they were better off not having a job than working in Old Town Tacoma Park. And I think that's a pretty serious, you know, sad state of affairs and something that needs to be looked at very closely. I think the community as a whole has to really decide, do we want to have a viable downtown, you know, Main Street, Old Tacoma, Tacoma Junction, or not?
Yeah.
Because if we do, we need, in this area, we need constant police presence, not once in a while, not sharing it with another neighborhood. And I'm not saying that to take away from the other commercial. We have several commercial districts in Tacoma Park. They're all important. But I can tell you firsthand, there hasn't been a regular police presence until about a week ago in downtown Tacoma Park. So that's one decision. Our citizens and residents and policymakers also have to really decide, do we want a viable commercial business district in Old Town Tacoma Park? Because it's not, the police part is safety is very important. If you want to take your kids there to shop and get a sandwich, you're going to go down there. If you're worried about 9:30 in the morning getting robbed with a gun, 7:30 at night getting robbed with a gun, 10:30 in the morning getting robbed with a gun, I'm not making this stuff up.
I know.
So, and the community has to decide, do they want to be there? You know? I mean,
I think it has a major impact, as you point out, on the businesses as well as on the community, and I think it is something we need to take extremely seriously. And I appreciate
if I can just
bringing
take
it
one
to
more
us.
minute, I'll just air out the issues as I see them after being down there for almost 10 years. Old Tacoma businesses feel an ongoing sense of neglect from police presence and protection, and not that it kept all the crime away, but as we've discussed a number of years ago, we had a regular police beat officer that was around both on foot and in the vehicle, and he or she introduced themselves regularly. There's a sense that criminals look at the area as an easy target, both due to the low police presence and the border town mentality going across jurisdictions with D.C., Tacoma Park, Montgomery County, PG County. I don't know how we're going to solve this issue, but maybe we should look to Tijuana, Mexico, or Brownsville, Texas, because there is a border town. There's a border town mentality here, especially right in Old Town Tacoma Park. Whether it's true or not, people feel like they can jump over the line and get away with it. Yeah. So I think it's really important to address that. And I guess I'll just wrap up with, I appreciate your attention. We don't need a lot of police pandering to us for a couple of weeks, or you guys pandering to us, or whatever powers it be. We need either people in a position like yourselves to come up with, and as a community as a whole, to come up with creative solutions to change this situation and turn the tide on it, or seek out people who have the experience and know how to do it. And whether we get more help from Montgomery County or not, I don't know. You know, there's certainly an issue out there of, you know, can we manage a police department to take care of our needs, or is a larger jurisdiction like the county more able to do that? I don't know the answer to that, but certainly it's what's happened the last few weeks has raised that question. So thank you very much.
I think, and just thinking of something else that we can do to sort of raise the profile of this concern, as you know, we have a new police chief coming in about a month, and I think, I'm looking at the city manager when I'm saying this, I think meeting with OTBA ought to be one of the first things the new police chief does.
Yeah, I've already been in contact with Chief Rakucci, and I believe Acting Chief Corsi has been as well, to make sure that he's aware of these incidents, and it was my expectation that I would try to make arrangements for him to meet with you as soon as he could start.
Yeah.
Hi, Chantal Rizal. I'm a resident on Maple Avenue. I'm also Vice President of the Old Town Residents Association. Can never remember if it's Old Town or Old Tacoma. Old Town Residents Association, which is primarily overlaps with Old Town Tacoma Park. I just wanted to add a little color commentary about the impact ongoing crime is having on residents of our neighborhood. It's not just the recent commercial robberies. It's the continuing break-ins. It's the car thefts that continue, the robberies that continue in our neighborhood. People are asking questions like, I don't think I can let my 12-year-old walk to the video store after school. They're saying, I don't think my teenager should be working at Everyday Gourmet. I know I had a situation just the other day bringing my children home from school at 3:30 in the afternoon to 3 police cars, sirens blaring, lights flaring, pulling up in front of the house across the street from me. It's constant, and it's corrosive. And it's not a short-term response that we need, although I'm very, very happy to see an increased presence of the police in my community. I was thrilled to be walking down a very dark Maple Avenue at 6:30 this afternoon to see a Tacoma Park police car driving up Maple Avenue. And we need that all the time. We don't need it just now. We need a continued visible presence and patrol around the metro. If you look at the crime statistics, it's the 7100 block of all the streets close to the metro that are most affected by the Old Town crime, and it's a constant. You can know that after these criminals are caught, there will be more people trying to take advantage of the residents of our community. After all, it was just last spring when Mr. Saloma unfortunately died in the course of a robbery in his house, and we have had at least 2 break-ins since that time on the same block. So this just needs to be addressed, and I'm sad to say that I'm somewhat encouraged that we had these very high-profile crimes, because they seem to be getting a response that I in particular and the residents of our neighborhood haven't felt that we've gotten otherwise. One thing that I wanted to mention as an idea is when you go to Silver Spring, when you go to Wheaton, there are security patrols. They're not, as far as I know, part of the police force, but they're visible, they're everywhere. Maybe it's time for that. Maybe we as a city need to think about, is it time to just have city-funded security patrols that wander around Old Town and the metro if the police department really can't be stretched that thin? Maybe we need to think about other options like that. So I just wanted to let you know how deeply people feel about this, and suggest that what we're seeing now is a wonderful thing, and we're hoping it will continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Sabrina Baron. I'm the president of Historic Tacoma, and our mission is stewardship for the Historic District, and the commercial district in Old Town Tacoma happens to be in the Historic District. So I'm here to lend my voice to the calls for more preemptive policing, whatever that entails. My organization has also recently become a commercial property owner at Tacoma Junction, and so these concerns strike even closer to our concerns. We hope to have an open archive with drop-in hours, and to see our commercial district at a point where merchants feel like they have to lock the door and vet who's going to come into the store. It's a very negative situation, as you've heard expressed here this evening. So I just wanted to lend my voice to the call for whatever we can do to make the commercial district more safe, more vibrant, more vital. Do we have bicycle patrols in Tacoma Park?
We have had some bicycle patrols. I don't know if we have bicycle patrols at this point. The acting chief is nodding. Yes, we do.
We do. That was one thing that occurred to me that would be very, very useful in an area like Old Town, is to have bicycle officers who could be both present, a constant, steady present, and mobile at the same time. And I mean, I don't have to tell you, many, many urban areas do that. They're all over Capitol Hill, which is an area that I know well. But whatever we can do to try to come up with some kind of preemptive plan to make sure that our community doesn't have to experience these kinds of negative events, I encourage you to keep on with the strong support that you've shown thus far. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi. My name's Kris Simpson. Live in the 7300 block of Cedar Avenue, and I'm here to talk about the crime, really just from a residential perspective. I'm just, as a resident, I'm not representing anybody but myself, but I don't really have any solutions to offer. I'm just here to express my concern. Seth, everybody gets organized and tries to get people down here, and I'm just here because I feel strongly enough about the problems that we're having. I've lived in Tacoma Park most of my life, many years, as a child and also as an adult with my own family. There are lots of benefits, as we know, to living in Tacoma Park. We have a farmer's market and a folk festival. I looked on the website. We're having a green building conference and a battle of the jazz bands, and we protect the chickens. It's a nuclear-free zone. You can laugh, whatever you want. It's a really neat place to live in Tacoma Park. That's why we all live here. But truthfully, I don't think any of that stuff matters if we don't feel safe in the town that we live in. You have to provide for our basic needs, picking up the trash and making the public feel safe. Those, to me, are the critical things. You're talking to, I am somebody who loves all the quirky things about Tacoma Park, but I do believe that these are the fundamentals on which everything else rests. The trash is pretty well taken care of, from what I can tell. But the safety is really not getting better. It seems to get so much worse. I feel like that I, as a citizen, I do what I can. I do my part. I carry my phone. I know 270-1100. I've taught my children that number. I try not to call without reason, but I don't hesitate to call if I see something suspicious. I'm a suspicious person. I walk my dog at all times of the day. I keep my property looking neat. I look after my neighbors. I pick up random trash when I see it lying around. All of these things, I think, help to create an environment in which we care about our city and we expect others to respect it. I'm pretty assertive, too. If I see behavior I don't like on the street, teenagers talking inappropriately, I try to get right out there and speak to them. And I do not think any of us should have to put up with what the people in the 7100 block of Maple have had to put up with. We know the stories up there, the repeated break-ins, the residents being unaware of what's going on up there. And I'm in the 7300 block. I'm not that far away, and none of us should have to live in that situation that those folks have had to put up with up there. I know that the police cannot be everywhere all the time. I understand that, and I have noticed an increased presence, and I appreciate that. I am here tonight just to say, are we doing all we can? You are the government of us. You are the government of Tacoma Park. And I'm asking you to come up with the best ideas that you can to improve the safety for all of us. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you very much. Anyone else?
Buddy Daniels, 19 Sherman Avenue. Real quickly, any meeting that you have in the future, which are going to be extremely important on this issue, for what it's worth, if you want the emergency preparedness information or anybody to speak briefly, and I will be brief, which is hard for me, I'll be glad. My home number is 301-270-5789, and I've got cards on me if you want any. I'm here tonight to thank the Tacoma Park City staff and members of the Public Citizens Safety Advisory Committee and Emergency Preparedness Committee for their assistance in an emergency preparedness information campaign which took place last summer. I'm sorry I'm so late doing this. I wanted to do it in October, but as the council knows, my migraine headaches kind of took over. Yeah, remember? The July Tacoma newsletter contained an insert on emergency preparedness and over 12,000 copies were delivered to city residents. The flyer was written in English and Spanish, and I wish to thank Andy Kellman for his input on the flyer. Also, Mr. Kellman, as chairperson of the Public Safety Citizens Advisory Committee, and the entire committee for their $1,200 to produce the flyer. I also want to thank Wayne Hobbs, Peggy Washington, and Jesse Carpenter for their assistance, and Patrick Rittenhouse of the Communications Department for his graphic design. It really was a nice flyer and contained a lot of information on hurricane and emergency preparedness. Thank you, Sarah Daines, Linda Walker, and Moses Wilds for their ideas in the distribution of the FEMA pamphlet Preparing for Disaster to the tenant associations. Thank you, Carol Bannerman, for your assistance and guidance. We had an emergency preparedness column in the Tacoma newsletters during the summer. Ms. Bannerman had the task of making my poor grammar sound somewhat professional in those articles, and that is not an easy job. Also, her insight and knowledge of just how to get things done was greatly appreciated. I want to thank everyone involved in the organization and implementation of the CERT training classes we had here in early November, CERT training for Community Emergency Rescue Training. Thank you, Tom Horn of the Tacoma Park Volunteer Fire Department, for your help and assistance. And again, thanks to the Recreation Department for scheduling the rooms for the CERT training. We had 7 different classes at 7 different times, and it wasn't easy. And our cable station for publicizing the CERT training classes. Some people can say, well, okay, everybody was just doing their job. Okay, and that's true. But I think it was the enthusiasm the city staff, certainly the Public Safety Committee and Emergency Preparedness Committee showed towards getting out some emergency preparedness information during the summer. And it's something I'm going to continue to keep doing. So, and thank you for your enthusiasm, too, to the council.
Well, thank you, Buddy, for initiating that effort and for doing all the work to actually go out and communicate with the neighborhoods.
Oh, sure.
Appreciate it very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, buddy.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Josh Fowler, and I live on Philadelphia. I'm here to comment on the issue of police effectiveness. I'm relatively new to Tacoma Park, and I really love living here. However, I'm concerned about the crime in the city. The recent string of commercial robberies in Tacoma Park has focused a lot of attention on crime. However, these robberies are somewhat of a distraction from the real issue. To me, the real issue is, are our police effective? When citizens report a crime, are the police responsive? Do they take decisive action? Are they courteous? What percentage of cases are closed successfully? Are they an engaged part of the community? Recent conversations with my neighbors and discussions on the Penn neighborhood listserv leads me to suspect that the answer to too many of these questions is not positive. I propose that the City Council take 2 actions to address this. The first one is to lead a rigorous evaluation of the performance of the Tacoma Park Police Department. To the greatest extent possible, this evaluation should be conducted in such a way that the performance of Montgomery County and Tacoma Park Police can be directly compared. This should be completed on a fast and rigorous schedule so that we do not get dragged into analysis paralysis. The second idea is, once the study is complete, I believe that the City Council should establish a committee or use an existing committee to explore the future of the Tacoma Park Police. Should we continue to have a separate police department from the county? Should the county take over policing from the city, or should some sort of hybrid model be adopted? The bottom line for me, and I believe for a lot of the other citizens of this city, is that the old ways are not working. Despite the highest taxes in the D.C. area, we appear to be suffering from high crime and a police force that is unsuccessful in making this area as safe as it should be. You can make the changes that we need so that we're not having these same discussions 3 years from now. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Dave Goodis, Willow Avenue. Our house was hit by the $15 scam man, the door-to-door man, in October. And I called the police in October, and I didn't really receive any interest from the police department when that happened. And apparently this guy, maybe the same guy, was apprehended. And finding that out a week ago or so. I figured I'd call the police again. Maybe I could identify the person. Maybe I could make a complaint about this person. The police officer that answered the phone showed not a whole lot of interest in me coming in to make a complaint, and I was put over finally through numerous transfers on the phone. I was put over to a voicemail, and I recorded a call on the voicemail, never received a phone call back saying that I would want to give a complaint or ID the person. And maybe the scam man, by giving my giving $15 and him not giving it back to me, and he lied to me, maybe that's not a crime, but it seems to me, given the crime situation in Tacoma Park, maybe we should be proactive, and maybe the police should show interest in stopping a crime before it happens. I would really, when I call the police, and there's something that's in a gray area, I would like to receive encouragement from the police, and I don't think that I did receive encouragement. So I just wanted to, I would like to see a more proactive situation from the police, especially given the crime.
Yes, thank you. I would agree with that. And actually, if I can do right now, if I can point you over to Acting Chief Ed Corsi right there, why don't you talk to him about exactly the information you were trying to get to the police department? Chief, would you raise your hand? Just if you could go over and fill him in right now, you can close a piece of the loop.
Okay, thank you.
But I agree with your comments. I think we should communication. We need to do a better job on.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, hello, everyone. My name's Helen Kish. I'm on 7300 block of Willow Avenue. And I'm here because of crime prevention. And I'm a fairly new resident of Tacoma Park. I've been here about 2 years now. And there have been just so many things that are happening that everybody's aware of, and it does concern me. I don't know what to do about it. The police are the professionals in this area, and I think that the community is willing to do whatever we can, but maybe we need some direction from the police department of what we can do. I know that they'll say, well, you have these groups that walk through the neighborhood, that will help. But whatever we're doing is not working. And it's not to put down the police department, because I know that they are probably very conscientious, but there seems to be something wrong with the whole system, the way it works. I know I've had at least a half a dozen times where I have had some interaction with the police, and I'm sorry to say that it has been less than a positive experience. I have also left messages on a number of occasions and not received return phone calls. And you know, the things that I was calling about, like a car that's parked on our street for 3 or 4 months, it's not, you know, a life and death situation, but that lack of response, you know, is it's not running an efficient department, I don't think. And I guess I'm just thinking that maybe something is wrong. It's not wrong. I don't know how to explain this, and I don't want to ramble, but you know, that something needs to change, because obviously it's not working now, and they probably prevent a lot of crime, but a lot of it is sneaking through. And maybe with the new police chief, he'll have a chance to take a look at what's happening here. I guess I would have a question. Is he being given an agenda when he's being hired as sort of, okay, come in and give business as do business as usual, or maybe an agenda for some change? And I know that Josh, who just spoke and said, you know, let's do an analysis of the police department and see what's happening. And if there's something that we can do, maybe they can lead us and tell us, okay, do these 5 things and this will really help. So I'm just here to, you know, I love Tacoma Park. We moved here because it is just a great place, but it's getting a little scary, and I'd like to not feel like I have to put gates on my doors and in order to continue living here. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you very much. In answer to your question about the police chief, I think there's definitely been a lot of suggestions being made, and he hasn't even gotten here yet. But I understand that various people are communicating with him, and certainly dealing with the lack of communication, I think, is one of the priorities, one of my own priorities. And I would agree with you. I think even when the police are doing a good job, if phone calls don't get returned, residents have no way of knowing that. And I think that's a big concern. And you naturally, if you don't get a response to your phone call, you assume that something isn't happening. And I think we could do a better job in that regard. Anyone else? Well, thank you all for coming. And I want to tell you. Can I just finish what I was going to say? Just wind up, and I'll give you an opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, I appreciate you all coming out. I'm hearing what you're saying. I do understand how serious an issue this is, both for the residential and for the businesses, and I do want to follow up on some of the suggestions you all have made. Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry I couldn't be here for the beginning of the meeting. I do appreciate that so many people are here to raise awareness on this issue, and it's something that does affect our business community and also our residential community very much so. I think it calls into question our viability as a metro-oriented community, frankly. So it's not just the areas around the metro, it is the entire community. Is it worth paying additional taxes to live in this great town if we don't feel that we can let our children outside or walk around at night? And I think it was Einstein that said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting something different to happen. In the 6 years I've been on the council, we've ramped up multiple times, probably more than 6 times. And it's involved patrols and raising awareness events and community meetings. One that took place within a few days of my son's birth, where it's so important to respond to these things quickly and make sure that we have a handle on the situation, that it's worth putting aside other priorities for the moment in order to make sure this one is attended to. I've brainstormed, I've proposed solutions, I've obtained joint funding with DC. There are actions that the city government can take, some of which were taken this weekend in the higher visibility that we saw, some of which need to be taken all of the time. And what I'm hearing people saying is that they're really sick and tired of the same thing over and over again. It needs to change. It's not okay that we have to come out as a community and say enough is enough every 6 months. It's time for us to see some dramatic change, to see it put in place, institutionalized in our community. I think we have multiple suggestions, though we're not the experts. We as a community have made multiple suggestions about good things that could be implemented. A couple of rapid response items that I know people have brought up are having flyers put in the neighborhood where a pattern of crime has been noticed, having those within hours of the siege, as it were, until the siege is over, having email notification. I think that we as a city are getting much better with email notification. The other day, within 4 hours of the holdup at 8 a.m., I had an email in my inbox from the city saying this happened. That's the kind of rapid response that we've been asking for during my tenure, and I'm sure before. So I appreciate the changes that are being made. More are needed, and the urgency of this is it cannot be emphasized enough. It does get tiresome, discouraging, and from many people's perspective, they will just give up this fight and look elsewhere for a community that is not under siege. in some ways is easier than trying to change a system if it is not functioning properly. So I hope that this is, I hope that the message has been heard and that the changes are underway. I know Safe Tacoma has struggled to get grounding. We are waiting for governments that have promised funding to actually take action on that. Hopefully it will be within 6 months of that funding having been made available, but I'm beginning to question the city's follow through on that commitment. As I said, the rapid response is the thing that we need to start seeing. Overtime for patrols, if that could be implemented immediately after a pattern is noticed, flyers to the neighborhood immediately after events are taking place. Those are the kinds of things that would be reassuring and would be different, but they need to be institutionalized, not only done because there's a call to arms where you really can't ignore the people in front of you who are saying do something different. So I look forward to the city manager's response to all of these suggestions. The urgency is there and has been there, and I very much hope that this council can exercise their oversight if no changes are made.
All right, thank you. Does the city manager want to comment on that or anything else?
Yeah, I have my regular report, but I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of you who did come out tonight and to voice your concerns about crime. And I guess I'd like to reassure you from my standpoint, from Acting Chief Corsi's standpoint, that we have heard you. These are issues that have been an ongoing topic of discussion during the police chief selection process, as well as Chief Rakucci once he has been selected. So I just want to make sure that I let you all know that we have heard you and we are going to be responsive to your concerns. In terms of my regular report, just a few items about the community center project. I wanted to let the council know that earlier today I did send by overnight mail a valuation of the punch list items to James F. Knott Construction, which is the contractor for Phase 1. As part of that correspondence, I have asked that James F. Knott provide me by a week from today with a schedule of how they intend to address the outstanding punch list items and other unfinished work, and advise them that it was the city's expectation that all outstanding work would be completed within 30 days of the date of my letter. So as soon as I receive that information, I will share it with you. Obviously, we have had substantial completion of Phase 1 for over a year. Certainly the contractor's lack of responsiveness in addressing these issues is a major concern, and if they are not able to provide a timeline in terms of how they intend to address these issues, I do think that I will need to have some discussions with the City Council in terms of how we should proceed. Because I do think the situation has dragged on way too long. In terms of Phase 2, the major outstanding item that we are waiting on for TRG construction is completion of the elevator. We had obviously expected that to have occurred by now. I sent a letter last week, I believe it was, to TRG construction reminding them that by contract the scheduled completion date was December 12th. They are in a situation now of liquidated damages being assessed, and have advised them that they would be assessed unless they can show some compelling evidence that the circumstances have been outside of their control. I will be meeting with the president of TRG Construction on Wednesday to discuss what the outstanding items are relative to the elevator and when we can expect that portion of the project to be complete. It's been a little disappointing because they certainly did a great job on the actual renovation work. They seem to have run into a problem for whatever reason with the elevator, and I hope to have some more answers for you next week. The last item relative to the community center I just wanted to mention is we do have the public forum scheduled, as we discussed last week, relative to the gym. There is an article that will be in the next edition of the newsletter about those forums, as well as some general information. By week's end, I hope to have a draft of the citywide mailing to you that will go out to all residents. I just wanted to flag that for you. If you can keep an eye out for in your email. And at your earliest convenience, once you receive that, it would certainly be helpful to get any comments back that you may have. Unrelated to the gym, just a couple items, one of which Councilmember Berry already touched on, which was the farmers market grant. As I had mentioned to the council when that was first applied for, the city is actually not the grantee, but we did agree as part of that process to serve as a fiscal agent. One of the things that Councilmember Berry did mention and may not be aware of is that they were actually so impressed with the grant application that was submitted that they actually gave the farmers market $10,000 more than they had actually requested, which almost never happens. So certainly my kudos to those who worked on the grant, which were the farmers market folks. The last item just to mention, and certainly not least, is just to take this opportunity to remind residents in Ward 5 that a special election to fill that vacant council seat will be held on Tuesday, January 30th. There will be one polling place only, and that will be at Columbia Union College, Wilkinson Hall, which is located at 7600 Flower Avenue. The polls will be open from 7 o'clock a.m. to 8 o'clock p.m. For those residents who will be unable to vote on Election Day for whatever reason, the deadline for the receipt of absentee ballots by the city clerk's office is 4 o'clock p.m. tomorrow. Is that correct? Applications for absentee ballots must be received by 4 o'clock p.m. tomorrow, and that emergency absentee balloting will begin on the 24th. Is that correct, Jess? Got that right? Since it is a relatively short turnaround for a special election, kind of a limited ability in terms of getting some information on the candidates out to everyone. The city has done another citywide mailing. Basically, this will be the first election that we've conducted with the instant runoff voting system. So the city clerk's office has done a great job of putting together a sample ballot and to get that information out to all the Ward 5 residents. Each of the candidates did have an opportunity to submit a very brief statement. I believe it was no more than 150 words. Outlining why he or she may be running for office and their qualifications. That information is available on the city's website. So, that concludes my report unless the council has questions about any item.
Yes, Barb, just a quick comment, and that is I think it's worth recognizing the work of Sarah Daines and the economic development folks in being very valuable to the farmers market group that got the grant. And the city's willingness to act as the fiscal agent was also very important. So please thank Sarah for us and the rest of the economic development folks for that good work.
I will do that. Thank you, Councilmember Berry.
All right, we will move on to the first item on our special session agenda, which is the second reading of the ordinance appointing the judges for this Ward 5 special election.
Move the ordinance.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any council comments on the ordinance? I would like to note for the council's benefit the last sentence on the background section of the blue sheet, which is that there is a special council meeting on Wednesday, January 31st to certify the results of the election, and I need a quorum. And since by definition we're one person short, I would like to make sure that everybody can be here. It should be very short, but it's on a day we don't normally meet, and if we are short a quorum, we cannot certify the results of the election. So your colleagues will be very unhappy if we're short. So just point that out. Any comments actually on the ordinance itself? Yes.
On the cover sheet, it says the first reading of the ordinance was held on July 16th. But that's no big deal. It's just the cover sheet.
On the cover sheet, yes. I was just looking at the ordinance itself. It probably means our city clerk is working overtime, and that must have been one of her 11:30 p.m. items.
Couldn't overlook the opportunity to heckle.
It should be noted that the city clerk, in addition to having all the same duties she normally has, is now also running a special election. I think that it works. It gets into her regular work plan once every 2 years that she runs the regular election. But this was not an anticipated election, so her other work hasn't let up. So I think she's doing this in her spare time, such as it is. Okay. Is there any public comments on the ordinance at second reading? All right, seeing none, this is the second reading of the ordinance. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Porter,
Aye.
Councilmember Austin Lane, Councilmember Barry, Councilmember Clay, Councilmember Siemens,
Aye.
Councilmember Williams.
Aye.
Ordinance passes at second reading. The other ordinance in our special session is an ordinance awarding a contract for a replacement voicemail system. And we put this on the special session agenda because people who've called the city have complained about our voicemail system, and we're going to do something about that.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. What you have before you is the single reading ordinance for awarding the contract for the replacement of the voicemail system. And I'd be willing to answer any questions.
Do we have, is there a voicemail system that actually returns the calls?
We want that one.
Give us some time, let's see.
And if you find that one, give us notes too.
There you go.
I just wonder if you could briefly describe the voicemail system. The reason I ask for that is I want to make sure this isn't one of those computerized systems where people walk through having to respond to question after question to get to the person that they really need.
It is not a voice-activated or voice-cued voicemail system. It's just like the other one. In fact, it has the same greetings and same prompts. We're not going to reinvent the wheel. It's essentially an upgrade to what we have now. What we have now is a DOS. It's actually it's an older system, and this is the upgrade. This is what NEC, or the manufacturer of our current voicemail system, offers now. And it is on a Windows platform. It runs on a server, but it is the same voicemail, the same prompts. As part of this, we are going to take this opportunity to make improvements to our phone tree, making improvements on any things that we need to change of our current tree, but it is the same.
Okay. Is that the typical life cycle of a voicemail system? I mean, we only bought that 4 years ago.
It is a computer. It just runs it's just a computer that runs all the time with some voice greetings on it. So it's actually a little bit better than normal for a computer.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Do you want to just very briefly, for folks who may not have the information in front of them, just very quickly say what the cost of it is and what we're getting for that?
Yeah. The price, the bid came in at $30,000, but there is a $14,000 manufacturer deposit, and what the manufacturer is wanting to make sure that we give back to them the licensing keys and the licensing of the current voicemail. They want to make sure that we're not adding another voicemail, not just upgrading the current one. So that will be refunded. The net price of the voicemail system is $16,814, and what it will entail, the vendor is going to come in and take our current voicemail system and upgrade the new one.
So it involves new equipment.
It's new hardware. New computer with new phone cards, and it is on a new platform. In other words, a new operating system. Right now, the current voicemail system runs on OS2, IBM software, and it's going to be now on a Windows platform, which makes it easier to integrate into our network. It also integrates what we call unified messaging, which gives us the ability to take voicemail and send it as an email to somebody. So if you're not near a voicemail or near a phone, but you're near an email system, you can get your email via your voicemail via email, which is a neat feature. Then you're only looking at one point to get your information rather than having to answer the phone.
Okay, thank you very much. Would someone like to move the ordinance?
Move it.
Okay, it's been moved and
You
seconded.
figure that out, Jeff.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any other questions or comments? Council questions or comments? Any public questions or comments? Okay. This is a single reading ordinance, so would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Porter,
Aye.
Councilmember Austin Lane, Councilmember Barry, Councilmember Clay, Councilmember Siemens, Councilmember Williams.
Aye.
The ordinance passes. The single reading ordinance passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're now moving on to the first of our work session items, which is a discussion of the proposed skate park in Tacoma Piney Branch Park. I wonder where Joy went. I know this is an item that she's particularly interested in.
Are we waiting, Mayor?
No, why don't we go ahead? We'll find her, but the
Good
rest of us
evening.
are also interested in it, but I
Okay,
know
great.
she was particularly interested in that.
I'm Deborah Hadeven, the Recreation Director for the city, and I'm joined with my basketball team here from Park and Planning. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to just I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. We'll start.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Bill Mooney. I'm the acting deputy director of our park system. And just by a little way of background, I wanted to congratulate you on the hire of Ron Mercucci. In a former life, I was a police officer in Montgomery County and worked with Ron, and he is a consummate professional, and I think he will serve you well.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is John Boyd, Park Manager at Meadowbrook Maintenance Facility. I have parks within this area.
Good. Thank you.
I'm Ellen Mishaki. I'm a project manager. I've been before you 2 other times on the same project. And I work in the Park Development Division of the Department of Parks.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Ronnie Gathers, and I'm the Southern Region Division Chief in charge of most of the parks that are in the southern part of the county. I'll offer my phone number just in case you need to get in touch with me about some other issues in the future. My number is 301-299-1971, and I usually can answer most of the questions for any parks south of Rockville.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to give a brief overview of where we've been. 4 years ago, the Rec Department and Park and Planning came before the council with a proposal for a skate park at Tacoma Piney Branch, which is the park just behind the Piney Branch Elementary School. And we discussed a skate park at the time. At that point, Park and Planning, where they were in their development, the risk managers felt like it was vital that the park be supervised. And we, as a group, went before the neighborhood and discussed the details of the park as we knew them. And the neighbors had questions about the supervision. Our plan for that park sort of fell through based on the funding source drying up. And I know the idea is still alive and the neighbors are interested. It was almost a year ago that I came before you to discuss the development of the same park with the notion that there would be more involvement from Park and Planning from the funding point of view, based on the fact that a park was supposed to be built to replace the park in Silver Spring. And at that point, we had decided to sort of shelve the issue because the park is going to be renovated, the entire park, in the 08-09 fiscal years. But we're here tonight with a new development, and I'm going to let Ellen introduce where we are this evening.
I wanted to also make note of the fact that I'm the project manager for the Alney Manor Skateboard Park, which has just opened recently. It's a supervised concrete park in Alney Manor Recreational Park, and we've been amazed at the turnout we've had. We're frankly not really even open officially for the season. Our official opening is March 1st, and it's being operated by Montgomery County Department of Recreation. On our first day, which was a warm January day, we had 73-degree weather, and we had 100 children there. Subsequently, every session that we've been open, which is 2 weekday evenings and Saturdays, we've had 50 children at each of those sessions. It's a very large 15,000-acre park, so we were able to accommodate that many people there. What we're interested in, based on the fact that we've had a lot of success with that, is coming up with an interim skateboard park between the time that the park is renovated and now. And the way that we would approach that is to try to get modular skateboard equipment into the park that we could use temporarily for a year and possibly a year and a half until the actual construction of the entire park takes place. The existing 2 tennis courts will have to take half of one of the back tennis court for a stormwater management pond. So we'll have basically a tennis court and a half to use for a skateboard park. And we could purchase some equipment short term, try it out, see how it works, and then at the point that we renovate the park, add additional equipment. That equipment would have to be moved out during the renovation and either located to another place or stored somewhere. So we're coming before you with an idea of doing this as a pilot project to see how it works out, and we have an opportunity with a short-term window to be able to do something like that. The Parks Department would pay for the equipment, and the change that you're seeing here is that our risk managers have now decided that they feel that we could have some unsupervised skateboard parks, that we should try them out, and this is an opportunity to do that. In addition, tomorrow I'm having a skate park consortium meeting that involves people from around the state of Maryland, and it's their collective wisdom that some of them are trying out the unsupervised parks and have been successful. And the legit insurance agency that insures most of the municipalities seems on board with that idea. So that's where we're coming from at this point.
Okay, good.
I'd just like to add, again, that when we came before the neighborhood groups and the community, it was with the idea that it was supervised. I know that that's what the impression that the neighbors and the community has. So I just wanted to have some brief discussion this evening and perhaps get more public input. But we're changing the rules a little bit, so it's actually a significant change. So that's why we're bringing it forward.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted, or do you want comments from the council now?
No, I think we'd like comments from the council.
Okay.
I'm thrilled to see this change in approach, and I hope that with public vetting that we can get this underway as soon as possible. I know I have, the thing I hear most from people is, when is the skate park going to be here? I don't hear concerns about supervision. I don't hear concerns about tennis courts being taken over anymore. We were able to resolve that very successfully by getting the schools' tennis courts upgraded, and it really did work out as a good solution for everyone. I think that was 3 years ago. So the questions I hear the most are, how about that skate park? When is it going to happen? I'm really, really very pleased that the risk managers have taken a hard look at this and looked at national information that's available on them. And, frankly, I think a pilot program makes a lot of sense. Let's give it a try. Let's see what problems we encounter. But definitely offering this to the community is, in my residents' views, very exciting. So I'm happy to make sure that emails go out to all of the neighborhood lists now that we have this information from you, and we can get some certainty about the feedback from people and make sure that it is widely positive. But I anticipate that it will be, and I look forward to next steps.
I just want to say I'm encouraged by everything I see with this. I appreciate your flexibility in coming up with solutions, and I think the pilot aspect of it should address any concerns that come up. Anybody I hear from will be very happy to see this going forward.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. I agree. I mean, I've heard nothing but questions about when is it going to happen, why can't it happen, can't we work around the issues, and you certainly have, and I really appreciate that. Young people are anxious to start using it tomorrow if you get it completed by then. I just want to make sure I understand what you need from Tacoma Park. Maybe you could summarize that.
I guess what we need is someone that can open the gate. It's still going to remain fenced as it is now, and probably have someone open the gate in the morning and close the gate at night. I think we want to keep it gated at night so that kids aren't in there when it's dark.
Yeah.
I think that's a big concern.
And I assume that's something you could handle, Deborah? Okay.
So can I just ask, is there lighting or any lighting issues?
No.
No.
So
There would not be lighting.
pretty much it's dusk to dawn,
Correct.
or dawn to dusk.
I assume that the
Daylight
park
hours.
is closed after dark, just
That is
like
our
it
policy.
is now, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and there's no staffing or expense to the city
None that I can think of.
plan at this point? Sounds like a fantastic idea. Thank you very much.
Colleen?
Bill, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with the Silver?
I don't see restrooms.
There are not any. The existing restrooms in the park are in very bad shape. At the point that the park is renovated, they'll put porta toilets back in there. But no, there are not.
So there's not going to be any porta toilets while we're doing our pilot?
No.
So.
Well, let me say this about that. We have not discussed this partnership in any detail without, we didn't want to do it without further direction from the council. The city currently, we support Porta Johns in several of the city parks. So I think that we would certainly be able to accommodate that as long as that was something that the city wanted to assume, and I don't see a huge problem with that. Would be an expense, but I actually know exactly how much it is.
But the county's going to have some sort of toilets there when the full renovation is done, so we'd just be talking about an interim expense, not like a long-term expense.
Yeah, there was a little misunderstanding about the location of a toilet, and I think that was resolved by not putting that particular toilet in, but presumably we can work around that and come up with a better location.
My next question then is about policing the park. Who's responsible for policing this park?
Park police are.
Okay. The park police are responsible for policing Becca Lilly Park that's, I think, borders between myself and Mr. Berry's district, and they tell us that they can't respond in a timely manner, and they can't do anything about the arson going on in the park, and we don't get much of a response. So
Sounds like something we need to take up with them.
Yeah, the neighbors want to have effective policing, and either the park police, if they can't do it, they should pay the city to do it, and work that out. But we need to have effective policing. And I'm not one of those people that particularly thinks skateboarders are any more of an issue than the kids' playgrounds, having been a skateboarder as a kid. So, but it is an issue.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. Now that the honeymoon's over and we can talk about other issues, the policing, I think, is something that we need to look at closer. And I would wonder if we couldn't have an MOU with the park police, so that the Tacoma Park Police can participate more actively, at least within that park, if not Becca Lilly too, to address some of the issues. I don't really see the skateboard park itself bringing new issues to the park. I think there's been issues in the past with the fact that it's very difficult for the park police to provide the policing on a hour-by-hour basis that the local police are able to do. So I think this might be an opportunity for that to be talked about a little bit more. I see Captain...
I was going to say, before we give another job to our police department, which is always stretched pretty thin, maybe you should let Captain Corsi participate in the discussion.
Let's promote him to acting chief for right now.
I'd just say that we do have an MOU with the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. It's, I think, on the long list of things that Chief Ricucci will want to take a look at when he first comes to the department. Some of our MOUs, and that being one of them, are in desperate need of updating.
Thank you.
I would also support an MOU with Park Police and our police department. I think it's been discussed many times how ironic it would be if our police who are in this building couldn't respond to a park which is adjacent to this building. So in this particular situation, and hopefully we can address the Becca Lilly arson issue as well, an MOU updated might be just the ticket. I think for us to instill in our residents confidence that this skate park is a good place for them to let their kids go, it does need to be a safe place that has, you know, a certain amount of attention given to it. And I can understand that park police may not be stationed anywhere nearby, so our police officers may be relied on. Whether or not we should look at the MOU entailing them paying our police department, I will leave up to our new chief when he gets here to advise us on.
I'd like to add a comment. I've been participating in the consortium that Ellen has put together and met with several parks and recreation professionals in the area who run parks, and some of them are unsupervised. And my memory, Ellen, correct me, is that they have arrangements with, some communities have park rangers, some communities have their police, but they do say that a key element is regular visits. Maybe not scheduled at the same time, but regular visits by the rangers to sort of to have a presence. And I know we talked this evening about police presence, so it could potentially be an issue for either department, but I don't think that it should be, in my opinion, troubleshooting only, that it should be prevented.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with what my colleagues have said about the desirability of doing this. I do hear from people also about the skate park. I think it's something that people in the city very much want, and I also agree with the concerns, the general concerns about policing in the park. I know Councilmember Barry and I were actually present at a discussion in his ward also about some concerns with graffiti and evidence of gang activity in Sligo Creek Park over on the other side of New Hampshire Avenue. And so I do think that this is something that we have to focus on. I have a couple of questions. One is, in terms of public process, you're talking about getting information. Actually, these are not unrelated. So I'm interested in knowing what kind of public process and whether it would focus on getting input from residents or just letting them know that the park is opening. I guess the question is, should the input from residents come before the park opens, thereby delaying the openings to some degree, or should you go ahead with the sort of the demonstration project and then sort of gather their input at that point? And then the second part of the question is the time frame. When you say ready to go before the park gets renovated, the park could be renovated potentially. I think the planning starts in fiscal '08. Is that right?
Actually, the design is starting next month,
Okay.
and the construction is supposedly going to be January of 2008.
Okay. So
to begin, it will be an 18-month construction period.
So the construction would start a year from now. So when we're talking about implementing it before the construction, when could it be implemented?
Honestly, it would probably be next summer or early fall. And in knowing how construction goes, I think it will be a full year after the skate park is open, before they actually start construction. I'm being pessimistic just based on my own experience. I
think you're being realistic based on our experience.
So I guess what I'm saying to you is I think it would be open for at least a year as an interim skateboard park before we'd have to pick up those pieces and move them someplace else.
Okay. I think getting it opened by the summer would be very important because it is during the summer that a lot of the concern and interest and activity happens. So if there's anything that we can do to sort of make sure that it's open by summertime, I think that would be optimal. In terms of public input, it sounds like you do have some time to get some public input prior to the time that it opens, and I think that would be a better way of going about it if you can do it. For example, pulling together a meeting. I know you were helpful in getting a number of meetings on the skate park pulled together. Maybe could be a public meeting and discussion pulled together.
Sure. I did want to respond to your question because I think that we, knowing our residents, can propose probably the best public process to go through, and I found my stack of skate park notes, so here it is. I'm excited that we don't have to go through what Olney, Friends of Olney Skate Park went through
Yes.
to get theirs underway, and it's really wonderful to think about a quick turnaround. when we talked about this 4 or 5 years ago, people thought that there could be a quick turnaround at that point. And really, none of us had the right idea about how long it would take us to line up all the stars. But, you know, I would be comfortable working with the mayor to come up with the right public process for this. If you want me to suggest something right now, I would say that we should have a public hearing. We should have some sort of resolution that we can then send to the county so, you know, there's confirmation of this, this plan, and the MOU gets resolved as soon after February 20th when Chief Rakuchi arrives as possible. But hopefully by March we could have all of the public process that was needed completed, and then there would be the implementation that could go forward. Now, when Mayor Porter, when you just asked a question about what the time frame was, and you said that it was a year and a half, you were talking about the park, right?
You're talking about the permanent construction, not the pilot project.
There's a cautionary.
Good.
But I think that the other point that you made, though, that I think we need to take into account is the pilot project will happen, and then there will be no skate park available for a period of time.
Correct.
Well, the temporary one will be taken down before the permanent one is built. So there will be a lack of skate park for a while.
Unless we have another location that we want to move it as movable equipment, so that is possible.
So you think you could put it temporarily someplace else?
Sure, if there's a place that we can all agree on. What I do want to caution you about is our procurement process is quite protracted, so we would have to put out an RFP to competitively bid the skateboard equipment. So
how long does that take?
Pretty long. The earliest I think we could get equipment out there would be September, is what I'm being told.
September?
That's what I'm being told. I don't know.
I think I hear your concerns, and I'll talk. I've already made some notes to talk to the director of parks tomorrow morning, and I'm going to bring this one up as well. If we can find a vendor who has a municipal contract somewhere else, we can participate in that, and that really does shorten the process, as long as someone else bid the equipment.
Okay.
So we'll look at some options like that.
Okay. All right.
Or we'll ask our executive director to give us a waiver. I mean, that's another option we have.
Okay.
This is an unusual circumstance.
Well, I think it's unusual because it's a pilot, and if you don't get it started, it's not going to be time for a pilot. And the other thing is the summer, I think, is a really critical time.
I fully agree with you on the issue of the summer, and the earlier we can get this equipment in, the better.
The other thing I should mention is that we would want to top coat the tennis courts that are there with a little bit of asphalt, and we're trying to fold that into one of the existing contracts we have for this spring. So there are some cracks in the asphalt now, and we're concerned that they could become hazardous, so we'd like to be able to top coat that. So that's part of the plan, and I think you also have an estimate of what a layout and a possible estimate of what the equipment would cost. Yeah. So that's just from one vendor, just gave me an idea. We would not put a lot of equipment in there, obviously, because we're going to have to move it.
You have to move it, sure.
And it has to be forklifted out. So
yeah, presumably it's heavy enough so that it's going to.
Correct, because I think some people think that you can have lighter equipment that can be moved easily, but then it's hazardous.
Right. They hit it with a skateboard and it moves easily. Yeah.
So that's what. Yes.
Just real quick, in looking for a temporary location during the park renovation, would the county be interested or willing to use private property and contract with a private property owner? Is that a possibility? And I don't need an answer tonight, but that's maybe one of the options that's out there.
You're thinking of maybe like one of the parking lots for the apartment
buildings?
Yes.
Oh, okay. One of the public parking lots?
It's a parking lot for an apartment building.
Oh, okay. That's something we would have to take back and ask.
Sure.
My recollection is that during various discussions on the skate parks that we heard about a number of people in Silver Spring who were also interested in this, and so my sense is that the area this will pull from will include a lot of Silver Spring, and that therefore some other possible temporary locations in the interim might be in Silver Spring.
There's also the property up at is that Chicago Avenue in Philadelphia?
Yeah, the former the intermediate, whatever it is.
The parking intermediate school.
For the tennis courts.
I'm just saying the property.
The former building footprint, which is a...
Where
is
there's
that
a
still-
wall?
Is that still...
Right.
Yeah.
It's,
I don't know enough about it. It's
Okay.
your ward.
Yeah.
let's
Be
work
happy
on
to look into it.
one thing at a time.
That's right.
Sounds like we have a year and a half to figure that out.
That's right.
I do have, and we can iron this out later, but because we haven't talked in tremendous amount of detail, what the sort of daily maintenance requirements would be for the interim park, and who would do that, and I don't know what that
My
looks like.
understanding is that the newer, initially, the first modular equipment that they put out there, the first generation of it, required tightening the screws every single day. I'm being told that the newer equipment might require monthly maintenance, but I want to clarify that definitely.
And who would be providing the maintenance? You all?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Good. Well, I mean, I think that makes sense, since it's
We're
your
the
park. and
purchaser of the
presumably-
equipment, it's our park and we're purchasing
That's
the
right.
equipment.
And your liability.
Yes, no, we're very sensitive to those things, and we appreciate that.
Well, and it would seem to me, too, the users might be involved in sweeping and the upkeep of the daily.
That's something I've been encouraged to do, is to have the users have some stake in the maintenance.
Yeah, we might actually even think about a way to get some of the skate park users together as sort of a group prior to the opening, and maybe get them involved in, thinking about it and that sort of thing. I mean, I don't know if it's worth, we have a very simplified plan here, and I know you worked on it with the notion that it would be easy to put in place and easy to maintain, but I think getting some skateboarders in there to help us from the very beginning, I think would be important. I know you've, Deborah, heard from some people. I've heard from some people. I know you've heard from a number of people, and maybe we can just sort of make some contact, and I don't know if you, Deborah, or somebody want to pull together a group of them to sort of get involved in it, even before it gets pulled in place.
I have a small group. I think probably they're all married by now.
No, they're just in college,
okay.
but so they might not be in town right now.
Well, my sense is if we made a public statement and said we're meeting to discuss it, it wouldn't take very much effort, and the kids would be here.
Well, and one thing I'd ask the experts here is, would it be reasonable to have a public hearing on, I'm sorry, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. Would it be reasonable to have a public hearing on a plan, or would it be reasonable to have a public hearing on, like, a proposal for this pilot program with kind of bulleted items? So no map until after the public hearing and the city resolution. I'm comfortable with it either way. I anticipate a lot of support, and I'm just thinking from the only experience that you all might have some suggestions about, not to put the cart before the horse. Like, do we get buy-in on the proposal as an abstract idea, and then work out the, very particular where the bumps are going to be? Any ideas there?
My sense is because we're in a short time frame, we kind of have to, we can't give the skateboarders a lot of input into the layout of the equipment because it's a much smaller area that we're talking
Start with the procurement process immediately.
Yeah, I guess that's really the bottom line, is that we would have to start that procurement process immediately, and that would preclude being able to get a lot of input from the young people. This is the nice thing is, since we're doing an interim park, we can take those pieces and they can be reconfigured after the reconstruction is completed, and then we can add additional equipment. So at that point, we might be able to entertain more input, but at this point, we're in too short of a time frame.
My sense from the people I've heard from is they would like to see something sooner.
Yesterday.
Right.
Yes.
Terry said tomorrow. A lot of people said yesterday.
And I want to thank you all for coming back to us with this very helpful suggestion. I want to thank you, Deborah, for keeping on this. I know you've been sort of bird dogging this for a very long time, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the flexibility, and I think the pilot project is a great approach, and it'll probably be helpful to everyone concerned, and I'm sure the skateboarders would be delighted to see it sooner rather than later. So thank you. appreciated to everyone.
Thank you. Can I just ask for clarification? Will we be, are we blessing this project tonight, and then you go forward and do it, or do you want to check on the issues that have been raised and come back to us with something formal? Should we all just be working this out in kind of behind the scenes? What's the plan?
My recommendation would be, if you're not interested in the minutia, we could work that out. If we have the concept approved, I do believe that we should have a neighborhood meeting. I don't think that would take a lot to put together. But we now can go forward and work out some of the details to present at the neighborhood meeting. We'll invite park police and maybe some of your people.
Great.
And be able to speak to it more intelligently, because we'll be more informed.
I am interested in hearing about a little bit more detail about the policing plan, but that is broader than just this project.
Do you need something formal from the council in the way of a resolution, or if you just get basically an informal okay from us now and then proceed with the neighborhood meeting and then get sort of the okay from the neighborhood, would that be sufficient?
If you're okay with that, is that?
I haven't heard anybody appear saying, don't go forward.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think it's more sort of making sure that everybody knows, as you said, that the circumstances under which we're going forward, and that this is a temporary and not a permanent, and it's unsupervised and not supervised, and making sure everybody's up to speed on what's going on, I think would be the most important thing.
Okay, so my suggestion that there be a public hearing and a resolution really seems unnecessary, and what we'll anticipate instead is more details as they are available, and then working out behind the scenes all of the issues, presenting as soon as possible to the neighborhood, to the community at large. I think everyone will really be interested in knowing the ins and outs of this. So a more in-depth meeting with the community about just this issue. So.
With knowing that the input from the meeting will impact the details in some way, so it wouldn't be etched in stone.
Right.
I think the information we get from the meeting might change some of our assumptions. Okay. How we go forward.
I'm comfortable with that.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
The council will take a brief recess and come back for our final two items. Good evening.
Good evening.
I don't know how you're going to stand the tame stuff after that introduction tonight.
What, the skate park, you mean?
No, not the skate park. The
Oh, you mean the
armed
beginning of the meeting? Oh,
robbery.
yes. Yes, well, I mean, that's a real serious issue,
Yes,
and not unrelated to what you're talking to us about.
No. Nice to know you're bringing solutions to us.
Yeah.
You got a silver bullet, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, right.
Right.
The steak.
Well,
Yeah,
should
go
I?
ahead.
Okay.
Andy, did you want
I was a little bit hesitant when Jesse got in touch with me and wanted to know if we were ready to talk about this, because I didn't know whether this was appropriate or didn't think to do this without the new chief being here. But then I said, you know, might as well get into it and raise the flag, and also the business about the roundtable discussions is something that you people have been discussing and looking at as to how best to communicate with committees. And, well, I'm sure you've read
Yes.
our thinking, and Councilmember Williams were present at the time in our committee, was that it would be beneficial to the council and to the committees to have a forum where it's not a one-to-one discussion, so that everybody hears all the discussion, everybody can say, well, what did you mean about, you know, what did you mean, you know, tell me more, so that, you know, it's a little more compact, and communication flows better. And the format we were suggesting was that the council, or however many members wish to attend, would come and to a special meeting of the Public Safety Committee, which would be in one of the other rooms here. And of course, since, you know, Maryland Sunshine Law and what have you, it would be a meeting where minutes were taken and published and what have you.
And it would be open to the public.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course. And we offer to have food also, you know, refreshments and food.
Dinner.
That's potato chips and a Hawaiian punch.
Well,
As long as it works.
yeah, I mean, I come from where if you invite guests, you offer food. But anyhow, so that was our recommendation. That was that's what we wanted feedback from the council on. And so I think that's it from us.
I think that sounds like a good idea. You're right. Having a less structured opportunity would probably be very useful. We are sort of working, as you know, Andy, you've been to a number of these discussions, working toward a little bit more consistency in the way the council deals with the committees, not sameness, and talking about having at least annual reports from the committees is, you know, something we've been talking about. And you all are good about getting us reports, but as you said, that would make it more useful if we could sort of sit down and have an informal discussion. And you know, as long as it's an open meeting and it's advertised on our schedule and everything, I don't think we'd have a problem with it.
Actually, we made this recommendation before your meetings, so, you know, this is not in contradiction to or in argument for or anything. It was that we
I think it's very consistent. I think it's quite consistent with what we were
Right.
thinking about, yes.
And, you know, so we came to the same conclusion.
Great minds think alike.
Something like that, yeah. So that's really, I don't know if anybody else, by the way, it came from Mr. Schultz, so that was his kind of...
Ward 6 contributing.
Ward 6 contributing, yes.
I mean, do other members of the council have, I mean, it apparently came from you, right? You're part of the idea of the meeting? Yes? Did you say?
Did it?
Is it after 10?
Councilmember Williams thought it was a good idea.
Okay, so Councilmember Williams.
Very good idea.
Okay, Terry, did you want to say something?
I just was wondering, as you were talking about it, whether it might not be beneficial to have the meeting televised or at least videotape for synopsis on snapshots.
Well,
No.
I have a feeling that some people get very shy and start talking in, you know, clouds instead of...
Oh, like we do here, you mean?
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. When they know that the cameras are there, and that was our.
Other than that, I mean, it sounds like a great, approach.
I mean, it's completely open. Whoever wants to. I mean, you know, Maryland sunshine. Yeah.
I think the other thing that I was thinking is there might be a difficulty because if we're going to tape it without actually having a person with a handheld camera, we have to do it in this room. And this room is not really conducive to informal conversations.
Right.
I assume that's why you were talking about doing it in one of the other rooms.
Right.
And none of them are set up for automatic cameras. We'd actually have to we'd have to pay someone by the hour to stand there with their camera. And that might be another consideration.
Certainly with somebody, obviously we'll have minutes, and I think with dynamics I see on the Public Safety Committee now, I think there's going to be a lot of ideas shared. And I'm really impressed with the people who have recently joined, and I'm also impressed with the older members. And we will be taking minutes, and that's going to be very important. I will not be taking minutes because we know my minute-taking ability is not very good. But we should have somebody taking minutes who is very accomplished and very good at that job, because I think there are going to be a lot of ideas.
And Buddy, the term is longer-term members, not older.
Oh, I'm sorry. Our more experienced members.
There you go.
Thank you, Councilmember. I was only referring.
All right. So
I think one of the things that I would hope to see come out of this is some clear direction to from the council to the committee on what our expectations are for the committee.
Yeah. Sure.
So I think the answer to that one is yes.
Okay. Now, the only question about it is, and that was something that Councilmember Williams brought up, and that was his suggestion, is whether this should be something that's scheduled for that 5th Monday of or some other, we can talk about that, but that was...
Well, if you do it the 5th Monday, you're going to end up waiting a while to do it.
Yeah, we just missed it.
Because the 5th Monday was this month. And
Yeah, we just missed that.
We decided not to do it on the 1st of January, so we're using up the...
All right, so we can toss some dates around.
It certainly wants to be after Chief Rakucci starts.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think we should probably start pulling a time and date together if you're going to get it on everybody's calendars. I would be willing to do it if we can find the right evening on an evening other than Monday. Probably with enough advance notice, I would imagine other members of the council might, I'm not going to promise for everybody, but I would think you'd get most of the council if people had enough advance notice.
I would think with 4 or 5 choices, we could hone in pretty quickly.
Okay.
So maybe that's the way to
I'll
go.
work with the city manager.
I'm sorry I missed part of your discussion, but did someone suggest that it also include the neighborhood association presidents who get a lot of information because of their role?
No, we didn't talk about that, but
I think, that would also keep it diverse and relevant and get you as much information as possible in that one event. So,
I'm wondering if that might be something we would do separately? Just
Yeah.
off the top of my head, in order to have it be kind of informal and conversational,
Maybe not as-
a larger number of people could reduce that effect.
It would
Whereas if
get-
we have a meeting with the neighborhood association folks and have a separate meeting with y'all, that could keep the number of people at each meeting small enough to have a lot of back and forth kind of discussion.
so it doesn't get too diffuse.
At least for the first round table. I think it'd be important to just meet with the council and then possibly expand from there, but
Yeah.
good idea and we've been discussing meeting with them.
Well, there's a connection here to something that was mentioned, the reports. You're going to be expecting reports from the councils, and we're in the process of finalizing ours. We're going to be voting it out hopefully this coming Wednesday, and you'll have it by close of business Friday. And our thinking at this point was that what we're going to do is just attach a cover letter to it saying, here's the report, and if there's any discussion, verbal discussion, of course, we'll present it, verbally so that I can be back and forth about it. But I gathered from your discussions about what you expect from the committees that you don't necessarily expect a full-blown presentation and discussion with the reports. So this could augment that kind of a communication on top of a report.
Yeah. I think we're still working out exactly what that would be, but we're trying to expedite the communication without necessarily putting you all or us through every year somebody reading a list of 15 things that you've done.
Yes.
But make the communication happen in a better way.
I understand. Next. Should we go on to the other?
Yes. Why don't you go on to the other?
The other one was a recommendation that had a number of pieces in it that was pulled together and initiated by Gail. And this has been, this predates our current problem. And it's been in the works for some time. And Gail, you want to?
Well, I believe that everyone has looked over both documents, that one and the response from Acting Chief Corsi. And so we're just kind of looking for some direction, if you want us to look at all of them, none of them, or combinations of them, or look for additional ways to augment or enhance the police department. So we're just asking for guidance.
In thinking about this and also in thinking about some of the problems that we're having, I had a couple of thoughts. Firstly, I guess I take Captain Corsi's comments very seriously. That volunteers aren't free, that you, even if they're totally volunteer, and I've heard of some of them that aren't completely volunteer, people get stipends or something. But you're still talking about supervision, you're talking about training, you're talking about any equipment people need. And so I don't think it should be thought of as free. On the other hand, it seems to me that one of the problems that we're having in the police department now is there are more calls for just trained bodies than we have on the department. And I wonder if thinking about this, we couldn't think of this as a way to sort of, and I don't have a particular, I guess I'm thinking more of the auxiliaries and the cadets rather than the interns and people like that. If we couldn't think of this as a way of sort of stretching our police force, maybe the last time we went through the budget, we authorized more officers than we funded by one. But maybe another way to address that is to say, okay, we think that we're not necessarily going to get to full strength, although we made a promise, and I would assume that the council would continue to make that promise, that if you do get to full strength, we will fund that. As a matter of fact, we'll fund you to keep recruiting after that point. But to acknowledge the problems that both we and the other police departments are having, and think of this as sort of a way of sort of stretching the force. So if we're not able to hire that last officer, maybe we could use funding for maybe 2 or 3 or 5 auxiliaries, and with the understanding that Captain Corsi has pointed out that these folks aren't free, that we would have to spend some funding supervising and training and equipping and all that sort of thing.
Well, we're aware of that, and in our discussions with Ed, we kind of talked about and tossed around the idea of that what's needed in our mind from the police department is a metric or a scale in evaluating these proposals, and we call that the bang for a buck scale. In other words, where can you get the most bang for the buck that
Not
you
literally, you don't mean.
Huh?
And when we're talking about holdups, that's probably
but it's street language. In other words, where do we get the most payoff for what it's going to cost? Nobody thinks this is going to be painless. And the kind of things that we're thinking about is that the most payoff is where you free up officers to get out on the street, or you can augment officers or make it look like you have officers. In other words, people in uniform who are not necessarily sworn officers, who can be put in certain positions where they act as helping out or auxiliaries, which some of the cities do. So we have been thinking about boots on the ground, to use another phrase from Iraq. Where can we augment the police force with volunteers? A back office job would have less use in this kind of thing. I mean, unless it freed up somebody to be out on the street.
But it wouldn't even necessarily be that. For example, I think visibility is one of the things that folks are concerned about. And it seems to me that someone who was, for example, a business liaison from the police to the businesses and could go from business to business and do inspections, maybe we would have to hire someone who had been a police officer, was familiar with security issues, and who could go from business to business and talk to them about their business. I know that's an issue. That's something that we have police officers do now, but you don't necessarily have to have a sworn person who is carrying a weapon and trained in using it to give people advice on how to keep their businesses secure, for example. And maybe that would be something that we could expand our reach a little bit.
Or be present in neighborhood association meetings or tenant association. I think for them to be in uniform, I think is again important in this kind of, which will cost money.
Right. The target hardening duties may be left to, non-uniformed personnel or uniformed personnel who have a lot of experience. But if you think about them as function, which is, I think, the direction is where you're going, and if, for example, one of the needs identified is foot patrols in high visibility, high traffic areas like downtown, then it might make sense to use the auxiliaries as the foot patrols that we can't really seem to field now because of the shortages on the staff. And then this also gets to the point of the different characteristics of the different areas in Tacoma Park and having a strategy that fits the profile rather than a sort of one size fits all.
The other role that we thought of, and that came up vis-a-vis what's been brewing here is the issue about customer service, and I've been calling it customer service, and we had a couple of emails back and forth with Captain Corsi about it, is that, you know, there's the professional duty as a police officer, and there's the customer service aspect, which a lot of the people have talked about, that needs to be. And for instance, that can be handled by volunteers. This is just a scenario that's just, throw it up in the air. For instance, at a major incident, to call up a volunteer in uniform, one of these yellow vests that says information officer, and that volunteer stays on the street with the incident, and that's the person who talks to the people who come and say, what's going on, what are you doing, where are you? That relieves the officers from having to deal with, silly questions, and at the same time provides, information.
Right. I like that idea because, they aren't really silly questions. Some of the questions are, what happened?
I meant from the attitude of the attitude of the officers who have to field it. They think it's silly.
They think it may be silly, but in fact, there are questions, very simple ones, like what happened?
Right.
And people want to know. And
but the 20th time you answer it.
Right. It gets a little repetitious, but one of the things about the exchange this evening that I thought was disturbing for me as a representative of the city government is that, the perceived or real communication problems tend to have a corrosive effect on the respect and confidence that citizens have in the department. And this is unfortunate because the department does so many very good things. They solve so many crimes, very high-level, high-profile ones, that people really don't focus on because they only focus on the crime that hasn't been resolved. And then it tends to attract, well, I had this incident when I didn't get a phone call returned, or the person was not professional or not helpful. And it's anything that we can do, both at the individual officer level, the administration level, and the level of thinking about roles for these reserve officers who could assist in the communication process so that every encounter with the department is a positive one, then I think we're not going to hear what we heard tonight, which I hope we don't hear anymore.
Yeah, I call it the root canal syndrome. I'm sure every one of you had a root canal. Certainly I did. So the interaction with the dentist is going to be a root canal. But, how it's treated, how it's how the dentist talks to the patient, what happens in that office, that makes all the difference. Whether well, maybe not all the difference, but it goes a long way towards satisfying what happens there. So, that's the piece that tends to be missing a lot.
There are any number of ways to address the issues, particularly when you're looking at auxiliary policing, whether or not they're in uniform. You may have a group who will volunteer, who will donate money, because all you're doing is talking about a couple of uniforms. You're not outfitting a police officer where there may be multiple uniforms. And when you talk about supervision, I know I was familiar with the police reserve program that we had with my former department, and we had a reserve officer who had rank, who supervised the reserve officers. Now, they reported to whoever was on duty at the watch commander at the station, but the reserve officer commander supervised the other reserve officers. And so they patrolled, and when they were, when we have special events, they would handle the traffic and things like that, which would free up police officers. And even just having them walk in some type of uniform, it doesn't have to look like a Tacoma Park police officer uniform, but if folks see, a shoulder patch, sometimes they don't even bother to say, is that a real officer? It looks enough like one that we don't want to even get close enough to walk foot beats in the business area. So we're looking for direction of what you want us to kind of research on and bring as many options as there are available for you to pick and choose should you decide to look at any or all of these.
But we do need input from the police department on the. I keep going back to Bank for about the reach or where the most of the payoff is for what it's going to take.
Jerry?
Thank you. This
I'm
discussion.
sorry, were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to respond directly to that, I guess, and talk more about the memo that I had
Okay.
given
Well,
as kind of
I'm
written
sorry.
reply.
Go ahead.
Go ahead and do that.
I tended to lump the categories. I put them into about 4 categories, but you could really even boil it down from there to probably about 2 categories. The first being the volunteers and interns, which I think we would all agree would be concepts that we would not be putting out on the street, but that we would try to utilize to free up potential time that officers may spend in the station or on clerical type duties. And I try to give a sense that those are concepts that we have used in the past. We're exploring some of them presently and actually trying to increase our use of some of them to get some very specific clerical type things done. So I think those are things that there's no disagreement are good things for us to pursue. They have, although they have some cost and they have some supervisory needs, it pales in comparison to the other 2 concepts, a cadet program or an auxiliary program. I started my law enforcement career in an auxiliary program in a local university, and I'm very familiar with how it works in a Maryland setting, and think it's something that you heard kind of spoken about earlier, where people were talking about commercial districts where they have a quasi-security presence, that type of thing. And I think there's some value to be had with that, but there is also an investment that needs to be made by the department and resources that need to be funneled towards that. We've just passed through a period of high vacancy rates in the police department. We're doing our best as we can to fill those. My discussions with Chief Rakucci, I mean, he thinks that that's our number one, needs to be our number one priority for the here and now, and I've made that my number one priority for the here and now, and we've made some pretty good steps on that. So I think that in the coming months, perhaps in the new budget cycle, we probably won't have a whole lot of that salary savings around to invest in a project like that, and we would definitely be seeking some funding for projects like that on an ongoing basis. It's a difficult program to do if you're going to start and stop when you have money available. There has to be some dedication towards doing it. The reserve officer program that some agencies have is an even more extensive undertaking in the state of Maryland, because there is no provision to have somebody that would be able to execute any type of law enforcement ability short of having a certified police officer. You see the trouble that we've had in the last several years in filling certified positions. I foresee that would be a very difficult thing for us to recruit people into. Not saying it's not without merit and without worth in exploring it. I just don't have a whole lot of hope that in the very short term we'd be able to put people out on the street as reserve officers. I think it's going to take, again, a significant investment, not such a monetary investment, but an investment in staff time, putting a project like that together. If that's the direction that we want to go, and I think as an upper-level manager, I mean, I would be foolish to say that I wouldn't want more resources available to me to combat crime problems like we're undergoing right now. But if that's the direction we want to go, we need to understand that staff time is going to be dedicated towards making a project like that work. Significant staff time.
Okay.
Thank you. I think this is a great discussion. I really appreciate it. I've advocated for the use of volunteers within not just the police department, but other departments within the city government for a while. I'd like to clear one thing. One of my theories is that if the thing's bad enough that you need a root canal, you might as well just pull it out and get rid of it. But I look at the list here and I see, a number of different possibilities for the use of volunteers, and I see some on here that we've used here in the city before that aren't on the list. I look at traffic control at events like the Folk Festival. My father-in-law wore an orange vest that the police department gave him and a hat, and I gave him a whistle and gave him some instruction on how to do the traffic control, and he was able to do that instead of having a police officer getting paid overtime to stand on the corner directing traffic. And the police officer was then able to either have a nice day off or else do more police-type functions, more crime-solving functions or crime prevention functions. And I think there's a number of other possibilities that I don't see on your list. Some of them were mentioned tonight, some weren't.
Well, this is not intended to be an inclusive list of all the things they could possibly do. It was trying to categorize.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's fair. Just a couple of other comments. There's a lot that can be said on this. I number one, support the idea. I would like to investigate it, understand more about it, and see how we can use it, or if it's possible to use volunteers. I think Chief Corsi's cautions are appropriate, and I like the idea of categorizing because there are some things that are clerical functions that, again, we've used in the past with varying degrees of success. I think when we had problems with some of those, it was because of a lack of dedication of supervision to the functions. I think I feel strongly that we don't want to put people who are not carrying weapons and not trained in their own defense and the defense of the community. I don't think we want to put them in uniforms and make them look like they do have that training and may have that vulnerability to or attraction to the bad guys. If the bad guy has a gun, I don't want him to look at somebody and say, oh, that guy might have a gun, I want to shoot him. Police officers are trained to deal with those situations. They have a uniform that helps them be identified. I don't want someone else to be put in that position. But I think there are uniforms that don't look like police officer uniforms that can be used, such as they do up in some other communities. I would just say that I would like, and maybe it's more of a roundtable discussion, or maybe it's here tonight, but I would like to see more thorough analysis of what are the possibilities for use of volunteers, and I think it would be a report that then the police department would look at and say, on a first pass, which of these are really would have the most bang for the buck, and then we would have to do the assessment of whether it's worthwhile from a cost-benefit perspective. But I think you go down this list. Translators, you hear the need for that all the time within the police department, and I don't think I can't see you saying no to volunteer translators if they wanted to start tonight. If the community could organize that and make that a resource that's available, the police department would, I think, love to have it. I can't speak for the chief, but I think it's, as they say, a no-brainer. There are other things that come to my mind. The volunteer who's willing to just go out and sit and watch an impounded vehicle until the tow truck shows up would save time of an officer. But there would be some research to see how do you do that, because I think you're probably talking about a chain of custody that you would, questions that would have to be answered on what works and what doesn't work. I just, traffic control at traffic accident scenes, a lot of different things that take up the time of a police officer that are good and valid functions, but not necessarily requiring the training and expertise the police officers themselves have. So, yeah, I would like to see a list of what can happen, and then, you know, with a list well organized so that we can then go to the police department and have them look at it and say, well, yes, this would benefit us and this wouldn't, and then we look at how it would be implemented, how we could implement it, and what resources would be needed to make it happen.
Go ahead.
My personal feeling is that we need to get the police department involved from the get-go. And the reason is because, you know, I looked at what's on the website for Montgomery County Police, and, you know, they have 8, 10, 12-page descriptions of what all they do in all these different number of these different kind of categories. I don't think with the size of the department and the size of the city that we have, that's what we're trying to go into. What we're trying to, or should be trying to go into, is filling specific, you know, very specific needs that need to be identified more closely. In other words, or maybe even trying it from both ends. Go out there and see what talents, what skills are available out there, and see if where they can be plugged in. You know, I see this as a very tailored kind of a effort and program. It's not that you'd have a cadre of people who could, you know, do a number of things.
Can I make a suggestion for maybe moving us along? I'd like to give all the members of the council an opportunity to speak to this if they want to. And then I have a proposal I'd like to put on the table for council consideration. Colleen?
Thanks for all the work that you put into it and the thought about how we would provide more support to the police department. I think it's one of the highest priority issues for the residents in my ward, and what I hear a lot from people on all the listservs and everything is how to provide more support for policing services in the city. I think it's going to be important to talk about these issues, but not have it divorced from issues of funding sources for these items, and I would be supportive of finding a way to provide funding support to coordinate activities if we really thought that they would be successful. I was thinking about this earlier when everyone was talking about the policing issues. The last community that I lived in used a special area tax in their business area. It was a big city, but in the small part of the city where I lived in, they had a special area tax, and they paid for a police officer for the business district, and her name was Officer Wendy. And everybody knew her, and she did all those things that you talk about, help people make their targets hard, visible presence, work different times, different shifts, always had a police car out there parked with her, and walked up and down and talked with people and made the area much safer. I don't think that the Business Association paid for all of it, but I think they paid for half of her salary. And I don't know if it's at least something to put out there and think about. And the other thing that I've been interested in for a long time also, because I had some personal experience with it, was to look at the way we currently fund the police department. And I talked about this a lot in the TASD committee, which was to look at leaseback models, because one of our biggest funding issues, as I see it, with what makes the policing services expensive is because of the way the rebate system works, where we get paid, you know, in dollars from 2 years ago, what it would have cost 2 years ago, what they say they would spend. And I would really like to see an honest evaluation of a leaseback situation, which is basically, it's about how you pay for your officers. It's like using a payroll service, but having the county basically become that service, so we're not always being paid behind the times. So they would basically provide the basic funding for the officers that were due. And I would like to see an honest evaluation of it. I don't know if it would work or not, but there seems to be a real issue about not evaluating that, and that's something I'd really like to see the committee do. One of the first conversations I had when I came to Tacoma Park was there was a fire department officer, with all due respect, Captain Corsi. There was a fire department officer sitting out in front of the fire department, and I knew that my nephew really wanted to be a volunteer firefighter, so I asked him, I said, well, I heard, you have a volunteer program, and can you tell me about it? And he was one of the civic officers, which I didn't know the difference between them at the time. Oh, no, there's no program there. There's some, ladies who do clerical work, but they don't get to ride on any of the rigs, or, they don't get to do any, work. It's all administrative. And, of course, I come to find out that that's really not how the volunteer program works at all, and that there's EMTs on it, and they do ride on the rigs, and they're firefighters, and they're paramedics, and they're everything else. And I think it is possible to have a robust volunteer department, and I think that it has to be interesting and rewarding for the volunteers. And I think as soon as you start thinking about it as clerical support, you're going to lose 3/4 of the people that would be interested in it. And some examples of some things would be social services support or victim support is one area that police departments use volunteers. It's not clerical. It's something in between sitting behind the desk and chasing down the bad guys and doing that kind of sort of bang, bang, shoot 'em up sort of stuff. There are a lot of creative ways to get people involved that do help provide support that meet people's needs for volunteering in the community, and I would strongly urge us to think about how we can make that a really positive situation for people on both sides and not kind of have a preset notion of how that might look or what it might be. And then also just around the police issues, there are some easy things that we could do, like be polite and follow through. But I dialed 911 after we had somebody drive through my neighbor's front yard, and I was on my cell phone, and I know the police phone number, but I couldn't think about it at the moment because this guy was driving up the street and his tires were blown and everything. And so I dialed 911 on my cell phone, and I got Prince George's County. It seems like that's a technical fix. It's not your issue, but it seems like, somehow we ought to be able to fix that. It just shouldn't be that hard. And so we should maybe look at what some of the easy things are that we could do as well.
I have to say I'm intrigued by some of what Colleen was just talking about in terms of the kind of that middle ground of not the clerical and not the more everyday police work, but some of that stuff that kind of falls through the cracks of ways of getting volunteers involved. My comments were going to kind of speak to a little bit of the separation of those two extremes without thinking about that middle ground. And just in looking at some of the suggested categories here, my sense was that a police cadet program or a high school cadet program, those types of things, I think, are going to require a whole lot more work for a small department like ours, where they might work in a larger department. I think the proportion of time that would need to be dedicated from the smaller force would end up pulling people off of on the street work that I think might cause that to suffer, and therefore trying to get that program up and running might kind of work at counter purposes. I think as I looked at some of the bulleted points under the auxiliary or reserve officer list, the ones that looked enticing to me were special events translators and computer specialists. But as I thought about special events, I thought there's a differentiation there where somebody who is directing traffic and therefore is kind of constantly needing to look at what's going on and not really get distracted with talking with folks at a special event would be a good place for a volunteer, because I'd like to be able to free up officers to attend special events and be in a position to be available to meet with and talk with residents, because that's one of the places where people really will get to meet our police officers, and there might be some of that interaction that goes back and forth that would get that relationship built, which is one of where I think it's one of the things that we don't necessarily have time to do and I would like to see us have time to do. And the other areas that looked good were the report taking and the data entry and record keeping. I felt like some of the rest of the stuff on the list was better left to the sworn officers. And that's my 2 cents on that.
A couple of things. I appreciated the materials that you all put together. I think we can get an idea of what you're asking us for, and we can develop a response. I also appreciated Chief Corsi's letter that gave us a little bit of detail about what they've done and what they could do. One question I had for Chief Corsi on the interns is both the college level, the high school level. What kind of track record have we had with them? Has that been useful to the department? Has it been more trouble than it's worth? Are there lots of that type of person that would be useful to the department? That's something I'd like more information if you have it now, and then if not, then maybe that's what the committee could bring back to the council.
It like the volunteer uses that we've done in the past has pretty much been a mixed bag.
The interns are paid?
The interns are paid.
Okay.
But I'm saying like the volunteer experience, it's sometimes a mixed bag. You get you occasionally bring on interns that are definitely worth far more than we're paying them and do a tremendous job for us. And sometimes you bring on someone who takes more supervisory time and more training time than they turn around and pay back. So I mean, it is a worthwhile endeavor because from a cost standpoint, it's a pretty inexpensive way to bring on people to multiply our abilities.
And I'm assuming that you could let them go when things didn't work out, within a short time frame.
Kind of the easy way to deal with that is you set up the internship to have a start and end. And if you're not pleased with somebody's performance, you just don't invite them to come back. I guess it's the easiest way to do it.
Right. I had an internship on Capitol Hill where I was not paid for 9 months with the prospect of getting paid. And I did get paid full-time for 3 months after that 9 months, and but all of it was a really good experience. I wouldn't think that we have the same kind of competitive climate that Capitol Hill has, so that 9 months of volunteer work probably isn't necessary. But the intern position, given that it's paid and that it's student based or student type folks, seems to me the most interesting of what has been talked about. And I don't know if looking at a more concrete proposal from the committee would be something that would be helpful to you, or if the committee would work with you to come up with a proposal. What I can say about volunteers in general, well, actually, volunteers, I can't speak about volunteers in general. I think there are just too many different categories of things that volunteers do. But having been an EMT firefighter at the Tacoma Park Station for 12 years, it's a very different type of training and type of occupation. First of all, in the county fire and rescue service, you have people who are trained, and the way that we kind of execute our training is not by carrying a weapon around and acting authoritatively. It's by remembering the facts that we learned in class and using really simple equipment, gauze and bandages and splints and things like that, to keep someone from getting more damage before they're delivered to definitive care, the emergency room. So very, very, very different from what I would think a police volunteer corps would be about. I just, I know how hard it is to have a volunteer organization at the fire department, and that's where they give us a lot of training, all our equipment, and then we do get to ride, and it's still hard for them to attract and keep people and, fully staff things. I was on the membership committee, I was on the board of directors. It's just an enormous amount of work. We even had one full-time paid person that facilitated our work so that we didn't have to do it all since we were just volunteers. But, I mean, there's no amount of rank and structure and hierarchy that can make it pay your bills, basically. And that's why I'm so glad that we have full-time fire service and we have full-time police officers, and they get paid. I'm really glad about that. I think that's important, and trying to supplant any of that except for maybe the most menial things, or allow people to do some kind of training so that maybe we'd be able to hire them later. I can't see this department or even this county taking on something like that in the police field. That's just my opinion. Where you have volunteer EMTs and firefighters that are critical is in understaffed areas like up-county, rural areas where by having additional volunteers, you improve your response time. You get more calls, more coverage, more expertise for the same amount of money, because they might have enough to pay 5 people 12-hour shifts, and then that's it. Or they might pay you per call, so that it's people sitting there waiting for a call, and only if you go out on a call do you get the $12.50 or whatever it is. I just don't see that as apples and apples. I think looking at the fire and rescue and the police and saying, well, they do it, why can't we? Just doesn't compute, given my experience. Just doesn't compute at all. The police department, bottom line is, the police department is a different animal. Ours is small compared to Montgomery County. I think that we should be looking at what larger groups are doing and what they're not doing, and there should be some kind of critical mass that's necessary before it is a good idea that we'd even pursue on a pilot basis. So I think you can tell where I'm coming from, and I would be glad to look at more information on an internship program. I think that's interesting. It seems like we would get bang for our buck, Andy, and potentially be able to hire some of the gifted people that we get. It's possible that people in that internship category would benefit from having colleagues, other interns, as it were, so that having just one might not be as beneficial to the department or to the interns as having a class of 5. I don't know the numbers. I don't know what makes sense. I'm not a police officer and not a volunteer police officer, but I would be interested in seeing something in that direction if the committee was interested in bringing something back to us.
Well, it's up to the council. We're not advocating any of this. We just did a survey of what's being done across the country in terms of volunteerism with police departments. If you say, chuck this, we will chuck it all. So
That's the only thing I would not say
advocating anything. We just wanted to let you know.
Maybe I'm being too nice. That's the only thing in here that I wouldn't say.
Okay.
We're
just asking for direction.
Okay.
That's all.
Let me just make another comment.
Just one other quick comment, and that is, I know you said you talked to or looked at what other communities are doing around the country. We do have a big resource here in Maryland because we are a member of the Maryland Municipal League, and so I would certainly offer to work with you to gather information from other communities here in Maryland through the Maryland Municipal League, if I can say it once right? To help you with that information, because I do think it is, there are a lot of tasks in the police department that don't take the level of education and training that some of the other tasks do.
I think based on the discussion and based on the information that we got, there's actually two different kinds of ideas here. One is the volunteers, which the department already uses some of. Captain Corsi says it's been a mixed bag. There might be some things that could be done to improve our use of volunteers. But I remain intrigued by the possibilities of going beyond sort of the standard volunteer type work into actually expanding our police capabilities into preventive work, visibility, having people be, walking around with, just like the orange hats do. I mean, that's an example. And also communication. I think those are the things that people have suggested that sound good to me. And that is considerably beyond what we do. And I take quite seriously your comments, Captain Corsi, that this would require some resources, even to investigate. I think that's probably well taken. So I would like to propose to the council that once the new chief comes on board, that we get the new chief and the city manager to give us a sense of what kind of resources would be needed to, working with the Public Safety Committee to the extent that that seems useful, to even come to the council with some kind of pilot-type project by the next budget season. And obviously, if you tell us it's going to take huge amounts of work to do that, then that would impact on my thinking about it. But it seems to me, and I'm not trying to underestimate the amount of effort that would be required or the obstacles that would have to be walked through, but as I'm listening to the people this evening, I'm concerned about whether we're keeping our community safe. Part of it is something that needs to be done by the police, but part of it is something that somebody who has the required training but who wasn't necessarily a sworn officer. And I'm not talking about taking somebody who's unarmed and having them chase after a bad guy. I'm talking about maybe having someone with a police radio walk around the Old Town area, talk to the businesses about what they need to do to keep their business secure, and if they should see something suspicious, call it into one of the officers who's on patrol. That's the kind of thing I'm thinking about. I'm not talking about, creating quasi-officers in that kind of situation. But it does seem like, in terms of visibility and communications, we're not there yet. And those are things that perhaps we could extend our reach with. I don't underestimate the amount of effort that's involved in pulling something like that together, but I think with the city manager and the new chief, perhaps they could give us a sense of whether this would be something they could come back to us prior to the next budget and say, here's a small way we could begin to develop it, or just forget it. The obstacles and the expense is too great. Is that something that you think we could do?
I think that's a value similar to.
Is that something that you think we could do? Okay. So if the council is willing to say, we're willing to invest the new chief or Captain Corsi, I don't know who he would be delegating to, in the city manager's time, and just coming back to us with an estimate of what it would take to develop a program like this, would the council be willing to go forward to that extent?
Sure.
Okay. I'm not suggesting that, therefore, we're buying into the program. I'm saying we're investing the time of the top-level people to tell us how much of the staff's time it would take to develop this idea. That's what I'm suggesting. Baby step here.
As long as it wasn't the volunteer idea.
That would be part of the question, I think.
Not part of my question.
Okay.
So,
We just
sorry,
wanted to do the legwork
I'd say day
to
on
figure out, what was being done, how much it would cost, what would be the liability issues. Present
Right.
that to whomever, and
Right.
I think
That's what we're
I
talking
think it'd be
about, right?
valuable information, and I would like to see that the majority of that burden be placed on the Public Safety Advisory Committee.
Well, I think they could do some of it, but I think Captain Corsi's
with
point is
them.
right. There would have to be
Right.
police involvement in
Right.
it, too.
Yeah.
And I'm not underestimating the amount of that. Okay. So
If I can just suggest that it would be helpful to get a preliminary cut on it so that if the answer is it would take a lot and we decide that It's not something that we want to invest in, but you haven't spent too much time getting that information to say it's not worth it.
Okay, okay. However you all want to do that.
Just one very quick comment. I see it was a fault of the formatting of this document. Really, the cadet programs and what have you, and the auxiliary police, not the auxiliary, the cadet programs and whatnot, had most of the purpose for that was to aid in recruiting, and we didn't talk about that, but you know that was the idea.
I did notice that, yeah. Particularly the cadet programs, I think, are seen as pre-officers.
Right.
Yeah.
Does the county do cadet programs?
Yeah.
And how's it, how,
I don't know how it
Chief
works.
Corsi, do you know how it pays off for them?
The one I'm most familiar with is Howard County has an extensive cadet program, and the state police also have a cadet program. I think it pays off fairly well for those organizations. They are both larger organizations than ours, so the amount of staff time used comparatively is a smaller percentage.
Right. How many officers do they have in Montgomery County?
2,000.
How many?
2,000.
2,000. That's but we're like
I wasn't
guessing.
sure. Yeah, I was going to find out.
Okay.
I'm sorry, in Montgomery County, I'm not sure that they use a cadet program. But
Oh, is that right?
They have an extensive, what they call an Explorer program. You know, you're familiar with the Explorer.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you all very much, and I appreciate your thoughtful comments on this too, Captain Corsi. Appreciate it.
I think they're good ideas and they're worth looking at.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move on fairly quickly to the city manager's updates, which I think she can do.
I already promised the city clerk that I would be brief. Just a few quick points. Obviously, the council's had the opportunity to review the report, so I won't dwell on it. As I typically do, I provided you with a quarterly financial report for the general fund. The long and the short of it is everything looks on track. There's nothing to be concerned about. In looking through the data, there are some timing issues that account for some of the variances, which if you just look at the raw numbers, it may look like there's a problem in some areas, but it's just a matter of timing in terms of when the receipts actually come in. I did want to just mention, as I had last quarter, I believe, that revenues from recreation programs and services were up by about $30,000 compared to the prior year, and that's attributable to the increased program offerings that we have been able to achieve because we have the community center. In terms of the expenditures, if you notice, there's actually the data in aggregate for the 2 fiscal years is very comparable. While there were some variances in certain categories, overall expenditures are pretty much on track and very comparable to what they were last year for this time period. So unless there's any questions, that's about all I had to comment on in terms of the financial report. In terms of the quarterly update, just a few items I'd like to highlight. As is always the case, as I'm working with the staff to put this together, I'm always just sort of in awe about the sheer amount of work that gets done by a relatively small staff, and as I always do, would like to take the opportunity just to express my appreciation to the staff for all the work they do. A few items maybe worth noting is, as we have noticed in the past, we are seeing that there continues to be strong utilization of Granicus, which was the web-based video on-demand service that the council had approved. Included in your report on page 2 are the 10 most viewed programs for the quarter. And as you'll notice, certain items were certainly of significant note to the community, including the Wamata Compact hearing, which was viewed by over 500 people online. And you can just kind of go through. Council meetings seem to have a fairly consistent but loyal following of 100 plus, sometimes peaking depending on what the actual topic is at that particular meeting. And growing. Special events such as the U.S. House Committee on Government Reform on Gang Activity, which we had the opportunity to host, was viewed by over 350 people. And the Candidates Forum for District 20 was viewed by almost 200 people. So it certainly has been a very positive supplement to the city's communication efforts. Just a few other quick items. that at least struck me as I was going through the information the staff submitted. As some of you know, we have a new children's coordinator at the library, Karen McPherson. She has done some very innovative things in terms of trying to appeal to the different age groups. Those have included basically hosting some regular visits by some of our elementary school students, the daycare centers, as well as some of the students and partnerships with the Recreation Department's after-school program. So I just wanted to compliment Karen publicly on the work that she has done. She's been a wonderful addition to the library staff. In terms of the police department, I think Acting Chief Coursey just commented on this. One of his major emphasis, which I really want to take this opportunity to compliment him on, has been the work he and his staff have done during the past few months in terms of addressing the staffing vacancies. We are about as close to full staff as I think we have been in probably some time, and I know that has been something that he personally has devoted a lot of time to. As of the end of the quarter, we were down by 3 commissioned officer slots. One of those will be filled by Chief Rakucci. So at this point, in terms of positions that actually have not been filled, it's only 2. They were also successful during the past quarter of hiring a dispatcher and a civilian clerk, and we are still recruiting for some dispatcher openings. So if you know of anyone who would be good, contact the department. We wouldn't tell. Included as part of the quarterly report are some preliminary crime statistics for 2006. The information I gave you, which was an attachment to the report, basically reflects Part 1 crimes. Based on the sheer numbers, the Part 1 crimes were slightly less than 2005. Having said that, obviously numbers don't tell the whole story, and I think what you heard here tonight is that there continue to be concerns in the community regarding criminal activity that certainly the city wants to be responsive to. We will be posting this information on the website, just putting it on the home page. As has been the case for some time, traffic enforcement continued to be a very high priority for the department. As you may have noted in the report, during the past quarter, there were over 1,100 traffic stops. We also, since this was the end of the year report, are pleased to report that there was an increase of 12% over the prior year in terms of the traffic stops conducted by the department. Certainly part of that was just an emphasis on this issue, and part of it was the fact that we are closer to being full staff, which certainly allows us some flexibility to focus on some issues that we have not been able to do in the past. And last but not least, just wanted to comment a little bit on some activity in the Recreation Department. Beginning in July, the Recreation Department did start kind of logging visitors, if you will, at the senior room from July through December, so basically half of the year. They logged about 780 visitors to the senior room. That's assuming that everybody signs in that we asked to. Having that facility and talking to Deborah Hadeven as well as our senior coordinator has really been a major asset for the city in terms of being able to provide programming to the community's seniors. You can pretty much walk through at any time and see folks in there using the computers, playing cards. Recently, we've started opening the game room up to the seniors, so if you come by a lot of mornings, you'll see some of the seniors from Victory Tower in particular playing ping pong and other activities. So that's been a really positive addition to our programming. And last, I'd like to just comment a little bit on the afternoon edition. That is now completely housed in the community center. We do have a waiting list. That program is filled to capacity. As the council may recall from last year's budget process, we did start this fall offering before school care. At this point, we had about 15 families that are taking advantage of that service. Also included just as part of the quarterly report, and I'm not going to comment on anything in particular, certainly if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I committed to you all that as part of my quarterly report, I would give you an update on each of the council priority areas, give you a sense of how we were doing in terms of fulfilling the implementation plan. If you've had an opportunity to look through this, and I did include the implementation plan as part of the packet, there's some things we're going gangbusters on. There's a few things that we're probably a little bit behind. I will be spending some time with the staff probably in the next few weeks looking at the implementation plans and seeing if, where we need to make some adjustments, and after we've done that, we'll certainly give you an updated copy. Overall, I am pleased that it's going fairly well. and feel like we've made a lot of strides in these areas that the council had identified. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I think it would be helpful, and it doesn't have to be right now, but I'd be very interested in getting updated numbers on afternoon edition. How many people are participating and what kind of an increase this is over past years. I know that was one of the big programs I was interested in, and I'd be very interested in seeing how many young people are now participating in the program. The other thing that I just wanted to point out is, you didn't hit it in your highlights, but I would like to, is noting that in December you received the Credentialed Manager designation from the International City County Management Association.
Congratulations.
Very pleased about that, and congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a long-time goal, and now I just have to make sure I keep it. They only give it to you for a year, and you're actually required to file annual reports in order to keep the status.
Well, we're very proud to have a city manager who's so credentialed.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to make that same observation and also congratulate the code enforcement officer on her credentialing as well.
Yeah, I'll mention that to Marjorie. I'm sure she'll appreciate that.
And I have a couple of questions, and what I'd be happy to do in the interest of time is just run through the questions if you're ready to do speed writing.
I've got it.
And I can get through everything I've got in 2 minutes. Okay. On the budget numbers, comparing the increase in the real property taxes collected and the personal property, I see that the real property went up 15.7%, which I would expect from the increased assessments, but the personal property only went up 4.5%, and since their rates went up just like everybody else's, and there's no 10% cap, but it's on business stuff. Just wondering, I'm always questioning about whether we're collecting everything we should on that. Okay. On the charge for service, the public parking facilities actually was down, so I wonder whether we're having any problems with getting parking revenues. The cable franchise fees were down by a good bit. I wonder whether that's timing or whether there's something else going on with those.
That's timing. I can answer that one off the top of my head.
The day laborer site, I see that we haven't collected anything, but I know that that site is still operating.
That's just a matter of the billing to the county.
Okay. Then just a kind of an overall question on the expenditures for the recreation department. They're actually down over the previous year, and given that the pay and benefits costs are up and we're more up and running with the community center, that's surprising to me. So any information on what goes into that would be helpful. I was also very happy to note that you attended the COG CAO committee year-end advance in December. Any attendance at COG events makes me smile, since that was difficult for you to get to in the past.
Yeah, I tried, Councilmember Williams.
I also noticed in the housing and community development area that the net loss of rental units in the city during the quarter was 3 per month. Yeah. Let's see if there was anything else. Just a quick note that one of the more striking numbers on the Part 1 crimes was the much lower number on auto theft in 2006 than any of the previous 3 years, which was one bright light in that area. And that's the end of my questions and observations.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. I would just like to run through and just quickly comment on a couple things. One in communications. It's really good to see the usage of the Granicus system, and I hope to continue to see that grow, which obviously is not in your control, other than the quality of the programming, obviously. But I do have a question about the Alert Tacoma, and it's not one that needs to be answered tonight, but I continue to receive expressions of concern from city residents that they don't feel things, that they get answers to questions that they submit through the Alert Tacoma. I took a few minutes to look at the system. I see that the greeting page still says the new Alert Tacoma system, and we've had it for a number of years.
Councilmember Singh, can I just clarify, are you referring to action?
I'm sorry, yes.
Action, okay, just wanted to double check. Okay.
Can I blame that on the time?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. And I've gone through and looked at a number of the items that are in Action Tacoma, and see that it doesn't appear to be used in the way that I thought it was going to, with staff members updating the status as it moves through the system. And so I'm not sure whether things aren't moving through the system or if they are moving and it's just not being recorded, but residents say that they don't always get communications that it's happening. In housing and community development, obviously they've been very busy. I appreciate the work that they've done. Library, I continue to get good positive feedback about both the library programs, especially for the children, and the Computer Learning Center. I was curious on the recruiting, that we have 2 individuals that are going through the University of Maryland Police Academy, and I wonder if they have a commitment to then join the city of Tacoma Park upon their completion.
Yes, what we do is when we actually sponsor someone through the academies, they sign an agreement that they will remain employed by the city for a certain period of time. If they were to fail to do so, they are required by contract to reimburse the city.
Okay.
I can get you some more details on that if you'd like.
No, that's fine. I knew we had done that in the past and we had stopped doing it, so I'm glad to hear that we're doing that again. Public Works, I think, just in the last day, we've heard some positive feedback about the snow removal, and we appreciate that. And then Recreation, you say that we are, for the afternoon edition, that we have brought that completely in-house. Does that mean we are using our own facilities here at the community center, and what are we using the gym at the Piney Branch Elementary School for after school?
We do use that for certain activities. Deborah will be attending next week's council meeting. That might be a good opportunity to clarify some information with her.
I'll go home then. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much, and I think if there's no other questions, we're adjourned for the evening.